Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1270 of the War News stream. And today we gotten some very big news that Russia's preparing a major offensive as peace talks are failing between Ukraine, the United States, and Russia. Also, the Russian stock market plummeted today after the Alaska meeting, and major gunfires erupted on the Israel-Egypt border. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from the front lines of Ukraine and also from other regions, including the Middle East and East Asia, over the course of the past 24 hours. We have been able to hear that as of 24 hours ago, the Russian Federation's armed forces north of Pokrovsk have been completely encircled, and as of today, it appears that is now a permanent encirclement and envelopment of Russian armed forces near to the town of Kucherov Yar. It does appear that the Ukrainian 1st National Guard Corps is continuing to push the Russian Federation further back towards its original front lines near to the area of Mirnorad, while at the same time whittling away and further destroying the remaining elements of the battalion tactical group that is seen in the area of Kucherov Yar at this moment, with absolutely no signs of a Russian breakout or a Russian breakthrough to attempt to save those soldiers appearing imminent here within the near future. Outside of that, we have been able to hear that major significant damage was caused in the record-breaking Ukrainian drone attack conducted a day ago, as we have also been able to get a large amount of additional satellite and picture evidence showing the absolute extent of the damage that was caused at multiple key facilities throughout the Russian Federation, and it does appear that as of today, we are still seeing that the Russian Federation is reeling from those impacts of the largest drone attack of the conflict so far. We have also been able to hear, on top of that the United States and the Russian Federation are still largely trying to figure out where to go forward after the Anchorage, Alaska talks, with the United States of America now inviting Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of the state of Ukraine, to the United States of America on Wednesday. We have also been able to hear at the same time that European leaders have been invited as well, as the future of the conflict will be discussed. We have already been able to hear that the president of Ukraine has stated that a cessation of the Donbass to the Russian Federation is absolutely unacceptable, and most if not all other Russian demands demands are entirely unacceptable according to the state of Ukraine. We have also been able to hear that some European leaders have already weighed in, including those in Poland, stating that this moment in the war right now is an incredibly decisive phase and one that could start to outline the security of the entirety of Eastern Europe, depending on the position the United States of America takes in the foreign policies regarding the state of Ukraine and the ongoing war with the Russian Federation. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear inside of the Middle East that the Islamic Republic of Iran has continued to issue threats to the United States of America about possible strikes upcoming in the future, considering that the Islamic Republic of Iran is adamant on continuing their nuclear weapons and development programs. We have also been able to hear that the state of Israel has continued their actions inside the Gaza Strip and have also stated that the Hamas forces within the Gaza Strip will have to unconditionally surrender to the state of Israel, accepting all demands at face value from the Israelis outright for the attempted occupation of the Strip to end or for the actual hostile actions within the Strip to cease for a larger part. We have also been able to hear of an explosion inside of Damascus, and we have also heard of further Taiwanese observance of Chinese naval activities inside the Strait of Taiwan, while the People's Republic of China has started to also leak out on the social media some first glimpses of the modern military vehicles and equipment that the People's Republic of China continues to procure and introduce into the People's Liberation Army. We have a decent amount of news today, and a large amount of news that we have not yet been able to talk about or cover yet, even in our run-through of the introduction of the news, but we have a pretty decent amount to talk about, and we're going to be trying to talk about as much of it and all of it in the greatest detail that we can, of course, as usual, tonight. And moving on from that and into our most major piece of news for the day, we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation's armed forces north of Pokrovsk have continued to be surrounded and appear to not be escaping the frontline situation that has largely enveloped an entire battalion tactical group. It has now been 24 hours officially since the Russian Federation saw that the 1st National Guard Corps of Ukraine was able to cut through their lines near to the town of Shakove and completely isolate an entire battalion tactical group of the Russian armed forces inside the town of Kucherev Yar. As of 24 hours later, this Russian unit is still stuck inside of Kucherev Yar, and it does not appear that any Russian offensive efforts are able to relieve this battalion tactical group or help them to escape from their positions at Kucherev Yar. We are also understanding that the 1st National Guard Corps is continuing their offensives towards the area of Mayak and I believe it's Nikanor-Rivka, I believe is the correct pronunciation. But nevertheless, they are continuing their advances within these specific areas and continuing to try and push the Russian Federation back further towards its original front lines at Nirnohrad. This situation is probably one of the largest encirclements seen in the war since the encirclement of the Ukrainian Azov Brigade inside of the city of Mariupol at the Azovstal metallurgical plant, as no such encirclement of a size consisting of nearly 800 to 1,000 men has ever really occurred and been solidified as an actual encirclement. Russian Federation armed forces have been encircled in smaller numbers over the prior years, around 300 to 400 apiece at a time, but those encirclements usually were broken through by those Russian companies, and they were either able to return back to the front lines or they were largely destroyed in detail. This is the largest one ever seen since the beginning of the war in 2022, and from what we are understanding, the Russian Federation is continuing to get pummeled and hammered in this area by the 1st National Guard Corps and the Azov, although we do not have a large amount of video and picture evidence to show of that today. However, we are able to hear that the Ukrainians have been stating that they have been taking prisoners from this area, a steady stream over the course of the past 24 hours, and that does appear to show us that this battalion is already under significant fire, and the morale and cohesion of the unit is beginning to wane, meaning that possibly 800 Russian soldiers will be entirely knocked out of action either by being wounded or killed or surrendering to Ukrainian armed forces. It
really is crazy how that turned around so quick, because so many people were doom and gloom about that situation, and I'll admit, like we said yesterday, I was a bit worried about it myself, but now it's completely backfired on Vladimir Putin, and this thing right here is proof that no matter how hard Russia tries to push through the front lines, they just simply can't pull it off. It's impossible, and that's why Putin is stalling so bad, because he knows he can't break through anywhere along the front, and he's stalling in the hopes that maybe he can try to buy some time while he builds up more forces to try to throw a bigger meat grinder basically at the Ukrainians. It just won't work, though. It's just not working.
It's absolutely not working at all. This went horrendously. And to quickly explain a little bit about this breakthrough, because it actually had a lot of potential behind it, at least unrealized potential, but to explain what was going on, over prior days leading up to this encirclement that has now officially been brought underway and is a full-on encirclement. The Russian Federation's armed forces were able to rapidly advance from the Mirnohrad area, or the Mirnohrad flank of the battlefield of Pokrovsk, rapidly breaking through the front at Nove Shikove and Shikove, and immediately advancing onto Kucherev Yar, and then further on north to Zoloti Kolodias and Vesely. This was a significant breakthrough at the time, and a large amount of people were incredibly concerned about this breakthrough when it occurred due to the fact of its rapid advance. Here's what it actually was able to progress into over the course of a mere 24 hours. Many people believe that for this reason, this was a very large and uncontrolled offensive that the Russian Federation was conducting, but initial intelligence and data from the Ukrainian armed forces largely insisted that this was only a battalion tactical group, strong at the best, and most likely was all dismounted foot soldiers. To explain really quickly the difference in military units and their abilities, in modern warfare, there is no such thing as foot infantry, at least in the actual structural form of the unit. While infantry do fight dismounted on foot, usually there is some sort of way that they get to the battlefield, or there is some sort of an additional motorized element that supports the unit. And generally, the most basic unit that you could see, as far as the infantry would be concerned, would be a motorized infantry brigade. And you'll actually see that there are a lot of those around inside the Russian Federation. Here is one of them. Actually, this is actually the brigade that this battalion tactical group came from. The 132nd Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. And this is something that's a little bit interesting to know, or at least explain as far as modern combat doctrine or modern combat strategy operates. This is the lightest available infantry unit that ever would be seen in most areas of a front line or in an actual conflict. These units are supported by artillery generally only, and have an incredibly limited number of tanks within the brigade, usually only in maybe a couple of dozen or less main battle tanks present for the entire brigade, and generally the infantry are transported around entirely by supply trucks with no armor whatsoever. They're dropped off into position, and then they engage the enemy. It's an incredibly simple sort of a brigade principle, much different to that of the mechanized rifle brigade or the armored brigade. The armored brigade not even really being infantry in its largest sense, but more so being entirely focused around armored actions. Nevertheless, this was the unit that actually did conduct this offensive, and from what we understand, this offensive was undertaken by a single battalion tactical group of the 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade, which began its advance on foot with no support, not even artillery support from what we understand, and advanced on foot through the valleys between Nove Shikove and Shikove to Zoloti Kolodias and Vesely. The only reason they advanced that far was because they were advancing through valleys, which I can actually show y'all here on Google Satellite. So let me make sure to go to Pokrovsk, then we go to Mirnohrad, and then we find the towns of Shikove and Nove Shikove, which Nove Shikove should be right here. As you can see, they actually were able to walk straight in between the two villages into a valley here. Then they were able to hop this one, get down into the valley at Kucherev Yar, and the valley heading to Zoloti Kolodias, and using the cover of the valleys, were able to literally walk down the valleys to Zoloti Kolodias and Vesely. What was interesting about this maneuver, however, is that this battalion tactical group split itself in two in the process, from what we understand, with 3 of the companies heading towards Zoloti Kolodias and another 3 companies heading towards Vesely. There was nothing that was supporting them behind their line. So there were no forces that were following behind them and securing their advance and ensuring that there was a way out or a general secured area where a supply line could be initiated to help those forward operating forces at Zoloti Kolodias and Vesely. There was none of that. So these 3 companies in Zoloti Kolodias and the other 3 in Vesely had advanced about 14 kilometers from where they started, near to Nove Shikove, with absolutely nothing in between them and the other Russians further down at Nove Shikove. Meaning, for the larger sense, they were completely cut off already and had overextended by the point that this update had come out from this very day, the 11th of this month of August. Then, because of this, because of how rapidly this unit was advancing, and it was generally believed at the moment that they may be supported by further brigades in the future, the Ukrainian 1st National Guard Corps was mobilized and deployed to the area immediately from the Strategic Reserve to be able to try and hold off the Russian Federation's advance and also try and conduct any sort of preemptive counteroffensive actions to throw them off kilter and pretty much confuse the offensive so much that they would have to stop and start focusing on a defensive. That is what led to the Ukrainians then solidifying their position with a counteroffensive and then completely cutting off the Russian Federation's forces at Zoloty and Vesely. And not only that, through direct engagements in battle, they were actually able to force the entire battalion tactical group, from what we know, either into refuge in this valley west of Kucherev Yar or directly within the town of Kucherev Yar itself, which is an incredibly small area with very little cover or very little built-up structures to be able to provide for an adequate defense of an entire battalion tactical group strong motorized rifle battalion. So generally, from what we're understanding, this unit is most likely going to be melting away quite literally over the next few days, and it does appear that any further Russian attempts by other battalion tactical groups have been unsuccessful, considering that they are having to start off climbing over the hill that exists right near Novoshikovye and then into the valley leading to Kucherev Yar to even try and engage the Ukrainians, break through the encirclement, and then try and relieve the Russian battalion tactical group at Kucherev Yar and allow them to escape back to the Russian lines further south. So at this moment, this offensive is completely collapsed at this moment. This is actually the worst collapse of an offensive that we've seen on the channel so far since the collapse of the Russian lines near Izium in the Kharkiv offensive of the latter part of 2022. These Russians are absolutely screwed at this point. And a lot of people have been talking about the fact that the Ukrainians are stating, even in the midst of this failed offensive, which was major at least in the amount of attention that it got, but in terms of manpower and available supplies that were provisioned by the Russians for this offensive, it was practically non-existent. A lot of people have been putting in their opinions about the fact that the Ukrainians are stating that there is actually a larger offensive that the Russian Federation is attempting to plan right now, where they are seeking to try and take the entirety of Zaporizhia and Donetsk in the future in a large combined arms offensive. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we are hearing from Ukrainian sources that apparently Russia is preparing multiple major new offensives that are coming up during the fall, and right now the intel is showing that they're amassing large amounts of troops, large amounts of equipment, and while Russia is saying they want peace, they are getting ready to slam Ukraine harder than ever very, very soon. So what are your thoughts about that? 59% said Russia will launch offensives first, while 27% said Russia will continue the stall talks first, and 9% said it's too early to tell, and they're 50-50 on the issue. And I would say, generally speaking, I believe Russia is going to continue to stall with the talks first, because that's the entire point of doing these talks. The entire point is to give Putin basically a chance to rebuild and also recruit more members into the Russian military, so that way they can create a larger meat grinder scenario and try to force the Ukrainians into a really bad spot. But the catch is, though, and we just saw it there with that failed offensive near Pokrovsk, that no matter how hard the Russians throw very poorly trained and poorly equipped troops at the Ukrainians, it really can't get anywhere because there's really no substance to back it up. And the Ukrainians will respond really quickly. And also, I'm very impressed with how quick the Azov unit responded to that incident, because many people were scared that maybe the Russians would get far in enough into Ukrainian behind the lines and then they'd push on through to more territory. But it turns out the Azov was very quick to respond and they put down this entire thing completely. So now the Russians are encircled and they're screwed now. So didn't turn out too well. That quick land grab that Putin wanted to do, it backfired completely. So I'm with the 27%. The stall talks will continue for a while, but they will eventually launch those offensives because there's really no hope of a ceasefire here. That's the reality of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that generally, I do believe that the Russian Federation is certainly going to be launching an offensive in the latter part of this year, because the Russian Federation operates off of the mental concept of projecting a great deal of strength to be able to try and give themselves a leverage in a negotiating attempt on the diplomatic level, and to also give them a better position that if talks fail, they're already involved in a significant offensive that in their minds would at least have some potential. So I generally would say that the Russians will be launching their offensive first before they ever get into another round of talks with the United States of America or the state of Ukraine, because of the fact that that would put them in an advantageous position, at least in their mindset, in negotiation talks. And if the talks fail, they're still in an advantageous position because their war plans did not falter or were delayed for the purpose of getting into peace talks. So I generally had to be with a 58%. But one other thing that I want to show y'all really quickly is the first corps of the Ukrainian National Guard, or the first National Guard Corps, as we call it here on the channel. Some of y'all may actually know of this corps. Some of y'all know that it's an incredibly famous one that's been involved in a great deal of battles near to the area of the city of Mariupol, and have also been involved in significantly large battles throughout major campaigns elsewhere, such as the Kharkiv campaigns of the latter part of 2022, such as the Bakhmut campaign of 2023, and also other major campaigns that have been conducted throughout the entirety of the war. The first Azov Corps, which is technically what this is called in the public, but this is by its technical definition, the first corps of the Ukrainian National Guard. This is their emblem for the entirety of the corps, which actually does go pretty hard. That's like a pretty wild looking sort of an emblem. But nevertheless, this brigade, or more so corps, has an incredibly decent amount of units under its command that are famous. A lot of people would know them just from name recognition alone, such as the 1st Presidential Operation Brigade, Buryev, which has been seen operating pretty much throughout the entirety of Ukraine. This is technically attached to the 1st Corps, but it operates almost as an entirely separate unit. It moves around really wherever it's needed. We've seen it in operation in Zaporizhia, in Donetsk, in Luhansk, in Kharkiv, and also in Sumy in some limited periods of time. So it does appear that the 1st Presidential Operation Brigade moves around rapidly. Then, of course, there's the 12th Special Purpose Brigade, Azov, which we have generally seen the 12th Special Purpose Brigade in fighting for the longest time around the area of the Severonsky Forest, where we could say that this brigade was largely baptized in fire. The 12th Brigade was actually raised during the war, or as they would say in military terms, stood up during the war, and then moved into the area of the Severonsky Forest, and has generally been involved in heavy fighting alongside the International Legion within that area. It was withdrawn from the area of the Severonsky Forest along with the entire corps, and it was brought down into this area because technically, while the 12th Brigade was attached to the Severonsky Forest front, it had actually been off the line during that time and had been replaced by another brigade, and therefore it was actually available in the strategic reserve to be shifted down into the area of the Munich breakthrough. They also have the 14th Operational Brigade, the Chernova Kalina, which is also present as well. Not a lot of people know about the 14th Operational Brigade, and it's not really mentioned a lot, at least in terms of video and picture evidence of the fighting inside of Ukraine. And there is, of course, the 15th Operational Brigade, which has been present a lot in video and picture evidence through the war, the Kara Da, or the Kara Dog as it's been called here in the West, and also the 20th Operational Brigade. From what we understand, all of these brigades that are present under the core structure of the 1st Corps of the Ukrainian National Guard are currently present around the area of the Munich breakthrough, which means that the Ukrainians technically have, at this moment, a manpower advantage of most likely somewhere around 15-1 against the Russian battalion tactical group that is stuck in Kucherov Yar. To have a successful offensive, where pretty much without question you will win, you generally need to have a 5-1 manpower advantage. The Ukrainians right now have a 15-1 manpower advantage against that battalion tactical group, and most likely any supporting battalion tactical groups that would be attempting to relieve the pretty much abandoned unit at Kucherov Yar in the midst of this fighting. Generally meaning the Ukrainians have this battlefield so well under control, it would be shocking to see that the Russians make any advances or even make a breakout at Kucherov Yar to try and return back to the main lines. So I hope that does address the battlefield situation in that sense the best we can with everything that we have available right now, because this is one of the few times, folks, that we actually get to return back to what we were doing at the very beginning of the war, which is an in-depth battlefield analysis of a given situation. Generally, with how battles are progressing right now in the war in Ukraine, they are so slow and laborious that you can generally lay out a singular analysis of the battle every 2 months, and that analysis will be standing up as a valid analysis for an entire 2 months due to how slowly Russian offensives move and also how high the losses are, which means that it takes a long amount of time for them to even coordinate at a minimal level their next defensive actions and then implement them on the battlefield. For that reason, that's generally why we aren't able to get into a great deal of depth and analysis on frontline developments and frontline fighting inside of Ukraine is because it's so slow rolling. A little bit of analysis goes a long way. But because this is such a rapidly developing situation, both for the Russians in their advantage and now at their disadvantage, there is a great deal to talk about as far as the Myrnihrat breakthrough is concerned and what it will be meaning in the larger part for the Russian Federation on the strategic level and on the greater diplomatic level. This offensive what captured world news when it happened. It was on the mainstream, it was practically on every single YouTube channel that when it happened, everyone thought that this was actually the end for Ukraine. This was the beginning of a Russian blitzkrieg of a sort, is what a lot of people were imagining. And now that it's been seen that the Ukrainians not only chopped up this Russian offensive, but have completely encircled an entire battalion at Kucherov Yar, it's actually becoming a massive failure for the Russian Federation and showing that this offensive, which took the most ground compared to any other over the past few years in a very small period of time, absolutely failed within a single day after the National Guard Corps, the first one, arrived in the area. So I would generally say this is going to be not doing a great deal, at least as far as Russia's image is concerned in Europe, as many European nations will most likely consider that if they continue to provide Ukraine with arms and equipment, it's quite clear any Russian offensive that is able to take ground will most likely take an entire year to take a few square miles, and also will be taking thousands of losses per day to be able to achieve such a feat. So supplying and supporting the armed forces of Ukraine is still an incredibly important thing to do, as Ukraine actually still has a very decent chance of not only countering Russian offensives, but counterattacking and destroying the offensives outright, like we saw on this front. But nevertheless, moving on from that, we have a lot of people talking about another major development that is also going on elsewhere in the world right now. But before we get on into that, I actually have been able to hear that we have breaking news coming out from the Middle East. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have some breaking news. So jump away from our Ukraine coverage for just a minute. There is some live breaking news happening right this minute. Apparently, Yemen has been airstruck by Israeli jets right now. It sounds like there's been two major explosions in Yemen's capital of Sana'a, if that's how you say it. I never really can say it right, but there's some humongous explosions right now in the Yemeni capital, and we're getting some video out from it, and it looks like a large power station has been struck, and also it looks like another target's been struck as well. These are very large explosions happening right now in Yemen. We're not being told exactly what operation this is falling under from the Israeli side, but it looks like they are carrying out some very large operations starting right this second. So, Enforcer, let's take a look.
And this is actually the explosion that was seen inside of Sana'a in western Yemen under Houthi control, as Israeli airstrikes appear to be targeting and destroying the Haziz power station within the city. We've also been able to hear some additional reports that two explosions were heard inside the Yemeni capital near a power station, according to residents. And the reason for the reported explosions was not immediately clear, although it does appear obvious that it is an Israeli airstrike, as intermittent Israeli air campaigns have been conducted against the Yemeni Houthis for months now by the Israelis, and this does appear to be a possible extension of such attacks, considering that in the past the Israeli Air Force has targeted and destroyed key infrastructure and facilities within the capital of Sana'a multiple times throughout the course of their air campaigns that have been lasting for months. So it does appear that the Israeli Air Force is currently striking the city of Sana'a once again, which is under Yemeni Houthi control, as the attempt to try and put the Yemeni Houthis back down and into hiding, at least for a while. The efficacy of these air campaigns against the Yemeni Houthis, however, is quite questionable, and we've actually questioned the efficacy of these airstrikes and campaigns against the Houthis here on this channel, as it does not appear that any amount of Israeli or American airstrikes have been able to bring the Yemeni Houthis to heel, because it appears that they simply go into hiding in some sort of undisclosed or unfound bunker sites, which largely lead a great deal of their personnel and equipment to survive the airstrikes, and then they pretty much crawl out of the bunkers whenever the airstrikes conclude, and then begin their campaigns against commercial shipping within the southern Red Sea, or their small ballistic missile attacks against the state of Israel at their own speed, or generally at their own leisure at that point. So it does appear.
And also, by the way, I can't really tell here. This is very early news right now, so there's not too many details on it. But we have not gotten an official statement from Israel just yet about where these explosions are allegedly taking place, except for the Haziz power station. That one allegedly is confirmed. But this could be just the beginning of these airstrikes, because we have not heard any word from Israeli officials about it. So with it being so early, this could be just the beginning.
It could actually be just the beginning. We're not entirely sure, and we're still waiting to see at the moment what it'll be developing into as time continues to go by. But an incredibly interesting development nonetheless, and it does appear to show that the Israeli air campaigns against Western Yemen are still going on, even at this point, although they're largely intermittent. But still, moving on from that breaking news and on into some other interesting news out of the day beyond the Pokrovsk offensive, or generally the Mir Harat breakthrough. While the Mir Harat breakthrough completely collapsed at this point and appears to not really be going that much farther or that well, we have been able to hear that there are a large amount of diplomatic developments that are still going on between the Russian Federation and the United States of America. And moving on you all on over here, I'm going to make sure to go through everything that we have on this today so far in the order that it came out. We were first able to hear that European leaders are going to be invited to a meeting that is supposed to be had between the President of the United States and Zelensky coming up this Monday. Apparently, European leaders were invited to participate with the President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House on Monday afternoon, which is an incredibly short notice meeting. A very short notice. That's literally 2 days from now. We also were able to hear that apparently the President of the United States is now going to be attempting a trilateral summit with Putin and Zelensky this upcoming Friday. We also were able to hear that sanctions are still being considered against the Russian Federation, as the president is tired and irritated with Putin. The president will consider sanctions against Russia if trilateral talks fail to lead to progress towards peace. Give it 2 weeks and we'll see. We have also been able to hear that on the same time, Zelensky has also stated in the phone call to the President of the United States today that surrendering to the Donbass is unacceptable. To explain the reason why he said that, Putin actually relayed to the President of the United States that he would be willing to accept this as a term for ceasefire. He will declare a ceasefire, Putin will declare and uphold a ceasefire in the Kherson Oblast and the Zaporizhia Oblast if Ukraine gives up the rest of Donetsk. So to really quickly explain this ceasefire, Putin is willing to ensure that a ceasefire will exist along the bank of the Dnipro River, where neither side is able to successfully conduct an offensive, and in terms of fighting, there's practically no fighting within that area, and has not been any for at least 2 years, and he would also stop the offensives in Zaporizhia, which largely have made it nowhere, because both sides are heavily dug in the Zaporizhian plains, and it's practically impossible for both sides to make an advance. In exchange, Putin wants Ukraine to give over the rest of Donetsk, which is the most solidified defensive positions that the Ukrainians have, where the heaviest amount of fighting is going on right now, and also where the largest amount of populations are currently at risk of being taken over if a Russian offensive was to succeed within this area. That is what Putin has currently relayed to the President of the United States, that the President relayed to Zelensky, is that Putin would make a ceasefire in 2 oblasts where there really isn't any fighting or any hope of any progress coming from any fighting if the Ukrainians give up pretty much the bulwark fortress of their front line inside the Donbass. So that's currently the arrangement, and Zelensky has flat out said no to that, although the President of the United States apparently said at some point, according to some sources, that that's actually a pretty good idea. Outside of that, we then were able to hear, beyond that development, that Putin did lay out his demands, which were those very demands, which are completely pointless and pretty one-sided in the Russians' favor. And then we were able to hear this. Actually, really quickly, I'm not going to read this one. I'm actually going to read the one directly from the President of the United States, because this one was incredibly interesting in terms of the substance of the tweet, if we want to call it a tweet. But I will read off the entire thing for y'all, and of course we'll speak about the part in bold. A great and very successful day in Alaska. The meeting with the President Vladimir Putin of Russia went very well, as did a late-night phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine, and various European leaders, including the highly respected Secretary General of NATO. It was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. The President Zelensky will be coming to D.C., the Oval Office, on Monday afternoon. If all works out, we will then schedule a meeting with President Putin. Potentially, millions of people's lives will be saved. This is something that is quite interesting because, just to say this isn't really a told y'all so, but we've been saying on this channel that cheap ceasefires do not work, and every single cheap ceasefire made over the past 6 months was a cheap one that is either going to fall apart within the next few months or already has fallen apart. And it appears that the president is now even saying that as well, although a lot of people have been saying that the ceasefires are the greatest things on the planet and every single one's holding up incredibly well and they're the best things since sliced bread. Now the president said, not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes does not hold up. So it actually appears that even the president's now saying that all the ceasefires that we've made over the past 6 months aren't holding up, and they haven't really done that well because they're generally cheap, and the ceasefires aren't addressing any underlying issues to the conflict. They're just pausing the conflict for now and not addressing the situation that actually led to both sides to go to war or trying to find some sort of a common ground. So it actually does appear, once again, folks, even by the president's own words, we were right on the ceasefire side of things. Just got to say that.
Kind of shocking. Kind of shocking we got that admission, actually. And honestly, I'm not even sure if that was an intentional admission, but whatever the case is, I will say it's good to hear some validation to that, because it didn't take a genius to look at the whole situation with the ceasefires around the world and determine, that's not really, that successful, because obviously, I think like the majority of them actually, if not more than the majority, were actually failing, that were actually put into place. So it's good to see the ceasefires aren't working, but the only problem with the logic here, though, is he's saying that ceasefires don't work, which obviously a ceasefire is easier to obtain than a total peace. So he's saying now he'd rather have total pieces instead of ceasefires, but he couldn't get the ceasefire, though. So it's kind of like saying, I want to build an engine, but I don't know how to build an engine, so instead I'm going to build the entire car. It's like, it doesn't really work like that. It's kind of like illogical, honestly, a little bit to a certain extent, but at least we got the admission, though, that the ceasefires aren't working. Maybe that will be the first indication of a change in the foreign policy, that maybe cheap ceasefires will be going the way of the dodo.
I saw someone in the chat say, "Oh my God, it's like he's directly quoting y'all." I don't know if he's quoting us directly or if anyone in this administration actually listens to us. If they do, good on them. For listening, that's great to know that they actually do listen from time to time. I would highly doubt that they are, though. But beyond that, I would have to say that beyond this, I also seen some people criticizing ceasefires in the chat and saying ceasefires do not work. Ceasefires do work, but ceasefires are a stepping stone to a greater peace deal. They're not supposed to be the be-all, end-all. That's not really the peace treaty or anything along those lines. There's always supposed to be some sort of a build-up or generally a groundwork made to a ceasefire, that we agree to a ceasefire now and freeze the conflict, but when the conflict is freezed, immediately we start working on a peace agreement or a peace treaty of some kind. So far, most of the ceasefires that we've been conducting around the world have had absolutely no build up to an actual peace treaty or some sort of a sorting out of the situations that we're seeing that are creating conflicts, like those between Thailand and Cambodia, India, Pakistan, Israel, Iran, so on and so forth. They just are ceasefires for the sake of the ceasefire. If we make a ceasefire and then say we are going to be working to resolve this underlying issue to ensure that we can actually get to a peace treaty, which would be binding, then that would actually work. But with the ceasefire acting as a standalone stopgap, it's not going to work on its own. It's a tool in the toolkit, and it's like saying that duct tape works for everything. Duct tape works for temporary fixes, but you generally want to come up with something a little bit more sturdy than duct tape for a long-term fix. But with that in mind, and all of that considered, I would have to say that the United States of America cannot move directly into a peace agreement on Ukraine. With that being said, that I just said about ceasefires have to be achieved to get to a peace treaty. World War I was not ended with a peace treaty, at least at the start. When the armistice began on November 11th of 1918, there was no peace treaty. That was just a ceasefire. And then we went into 1919 and then ratified the Treaty of Versailles, which was the actual peace treaty that officially ended the conflict. That is how we ended World War I. With World War II, we actually went directly into peace treaties, but that was in a special circumstance. In World War II, the Allies and the Axis were fighting on the concept of total war, with the concept, or generally policy, of unconditional surrender, meaning that we were not going to allow for a ceasefire to lead to a peace treaty, because that means there would be a conditional surrender, and they would be able to negotiate the conditions to their surrender. We wanted to fight them until they were no longer able to fight, and their nation was entirely destroyed or was completely broken and no longer had a will to fight, meaning that they signed a peace treaty which was an unconditional surrender. And the unconditional surrender had the exact terms of what would create a peace within that region. That's generally how that worked in World War II. This isn't a similar sort of an instance to World War II, and the concept of a peace treaty before a ceasefire cannot be achieved in this sort of a conflict. We must achieve a ceasefire first in Ukraine before we move on to a peace treaty. Otherwise, there's no sort of an amicable or generally neutral enough atmosphere between the two parties to actually negotiate a peace with a level head, generally looking for a compromise on both sides and some sort of a conditions given to both sides and due consideration to accept a peace treaty. So with that in mind, we have to have a ceasefire in Ukraine before we can get a peace treaty, much like any other war where you're going with the concept of total victory. So with that in mind, moving from saying ceasefires don't work, let's just get straight into a peace treaty, it's not going to work either. Like, a ceasefire is already not working, but trying to skip straight to a peace treaty also will not work either. But nonetheless, a lot of people have been talking about the situation, and Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so Zelensky will be attending a meeting at the White House on Monday, which is literally just a day or two away, and the European leaders are invited this time. So this has got a lot of people concerned that Zelensky is returning to the White House again, because of course the last time he was at the White House, we all remember how that went. It was quite interesting to watch, kind of interesting. But what are your thoughts about this new meeting here, and now with the European leaders being invited as well? So 49% said the U.S. will strongly pressure Ukraine to end the war, while 27% said the U.S. will let Ukraine decide the action as freely, and 16% said it will be a mix of both, a little bit of pressuring and a little bit of letting Ukraine decide on their own. So what's going to be different this time at the White House meeting is I believe it's the NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte is going to be there representing Zelensky, and also the Finnish President Alexander Stubb will be there with Zelensky as well. So Zelensky is not on a lonely island this time. He will be there with friends who will basically be helping to represent Ukraine in front of the U.S. president. So I think that's a good start. Now, hopefully I will say this. Hopefully Zelensky just caves and wears the suit tomorrow, and I think he will. Of course, say what you will about that. It's just about trying to make sure to smooth things over a little bit. We're not trying to create issues over a suit, but just wear the suits. That way, there's not a point to yap about on that, and that'll solve that issue. But now that Zelensky has friends going to the White House meeting, I'm a little bit more hopeful this time that maybe it won't be a political ambush on President Zelensky, and maybe it will be cordial. So I believe it's going to be a mix of pressuring and also letting Ukraine decide to a certain degree. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the United States is most likely going to be strongly pressuring the Ukrainians to try and accept some sort of a outright peace treaty, which I believe that the Ukrainians will not accept, and they're going to be emboldened to not accept a peace treaty, especially one that will have unacceptable terms for the state of Ukraine, because the European Union will continue, from what we understand, to unconditionally support the Ukrainians in the conflict into an indefinite period of time, for however much longer the war will last. So with that in mind, I do not believe that the United States will really get anywhere with trying to pressure the Ukrainians, but that is not going to stop them, at least from what I could tell. That is going to be a disaster, just to let you all know. I'm going to be upfront. If the United States tries to pressure the Ukrainians into accepting an unfair peace treaty, not a ceasefire, but an actual peace treaty, that is going to go incredibly poorly, because the Europeans are not going to accept that, and the Europeans are half of the economic and military power of the Western sphere in the Atlantic. So if they do not accept that, that is pretty much an American-sized power, militarily and economically, telling America, obviously an American-sized economic and military power, that they are not going to accept those terms, and they're going to continue to support the Ukrainians regardless, and then the United States might be looking at a possible schism in the Western sphere again, which is not anything that you would want to see, at least from an American strategic perspective or a strategic ambition. So with that in mind, I would have to say that while we're going to do that, and I would be with the 49%, it's probably not going to turn out all too well if the United States is very heavy on trying to force the Ukrainians into an unfair peace treaty of some type, or any peace treaty for that matter, just to try and force an end to the conflict. So
I just wonder what it's going to look like this time, because last time it was a very odd appearance by Zelensky at the White House. Zelensky showed up. There was already some tension the moment he got out of the van. The president immediately commented on him not wearing a suit. So it started off kind of rough. rough, and then it got way rougher as the meeting went on. So this time, it seems like Zelensky's going to have an entourage. It's going to be his European allies that will be with Zelensky, and I assume the U.S. president is going to have his entire entourage, including the vice president, on one side or another. So I'm curious what the tone is going to be at this meeting. Is it going to be hostile, Zelensky and the European side versus the American side, where they're kind of like at odds with one another, or is it going to be more of a unified approach this time instead of the last?
I would have to say it's going to be a little bit interesting to see based off of the last time. I would have to tell you all, I'm actually kind of leaning in the camp. It's going to probably be another ambush again. Because generally, I'll explain a little bit of what we've said behind the scenes, and I think this might end up being the case. We might be wrong, but I will go with our general framework. The peace talk in Anchorage wasn't really a peace talk, and it really went nowhere. And generally, it's being looked at right now by a lot in America to be, for the larger extent, a failure. As a matter of fact, we're now hearing that polling came out today from the American public on multiple different media outlets showing that about 88% of Americans have an incredibly negative, if not hostile, view of Vladimir Putin, showing that he's incredibly unpopular in the United States. So the president is mostly going to be trying to shift this story into one where the United States isn't necessarily at fault for not getting a peace inside of the Ukraine war, but it's once again going to be put on the Europeans and the Ukrainians. And considering that there's going to be an invitation to European leaders, and some of them have already accepted and will be present on Monday, when the European leaders and the president of Ukraine arrives, they'll be brought into the Oval Office, and there will probably be a dressing down conducted again by the vice president and the president against these leaders. There's going to be a dressing down in Ukraine that they're just not willing to accept any kind of a peace. Russia's being very amenable. There's all these people dying. Don't you care about people? Don't you love people like puppies, children, all that sort of a deal. And then then there'll be a finger pointing to the European leaders that are present and say, you people keep this going too by keeping funding them. So y'all all need to just accept this so that way this will all end. I'm having a feeling that that's most likely the way it's going to go in a very paraphrased form. And I don't really know how it's going to go on the other side as far as Zelensky and the European leaders' reactions, but I have a feeling that that's most likely going to be the approach made by the president, so that way it can kind of deflect from how there was absolutely nothing achieved in Anchorage, which there was a lot built up leading up to the Anchorage meeting, that if there was no peace agreement that came out of it, or any sort of a concept that there would be a peace agreement, then they would just absolutely go ham on the Russians. Then there was no peace agreement, and then they didn't go ham on the Russians, and now a lot of people are starting to see that Putin's full of shit, at least in this country, and he's becoming a very unpopular person here.
If you really think about it, you look at the people that would be accompanying Zelensky to this White House meeting, it's going to be the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Now, Mark Rutte, he's very pro protecting Europe, but at the same time, though, I believe Mark tends to lean toward the United States side a little bit more than Europe when it comes to be convenient. So he might not be super adamant on defending Zelensky's viewpoint. He might lean toward the U.S.'s perspective if it comes down to like some type of shouting match or something again. So I'm not sure if he's going to be a huge proponent for Zelensky. The Finnish president, Alexander Stubb, he tends to lean toward the European side a lot more from what I know about him. So he would tend to maybe speak up if something was said that might denigrate, or I guess you could degrade Zelensky's position, I guess you could say. He might speak up. But still, though, in a pressured environment with the U.S. president sort of like dressing someone down, it's going to be interesting to see if European leaders, whoever's there, speaks up. But notice, though, that apparently the most outspoken European leaders, like, for example, Macron, is apparently not going to be there. I did notice that. So that kind of gives you an idea of exactly who's going to be in the room. And it sounds like the most adamant ones for Ukraine are not going to be there, at least from what we're hearing.
Yeah, I would have to say so. I think that that's going to be very interesting to note as well. And I think that it's generally showing how this will end up. I'll be honest with y'all, I don't really have a lot of optimism for how this is going to end up, considering the way the last meeting ended up between the President of the United States and Zelensky. But moving on from that and on into Poland, we also have been able to hear that while all of this is going on as far as the diplomatic intrigue in Washington, or the planned diplomatic intrigue that'll be coming up on Monday, we have been able to hear that one of the top statements from Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Poland, he has stated that the game for Ukraine's future has entered a decisive phase, which generally the Polish line of thinking or reasoning in the government is that if Ukraine's future is entered a decisive phase, that also means that Poland's future is entering a decisive phase as well, because the future of Ukraine generally is going to be the projection for the future of the whole of Eastern Europe. And if the West caves in Ukraine, Poland is going to be next. That's generally the thinking. So it does appear that, at least as far as the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is concerned, he is stating that pretty much the entire future of Eastern Europe hangs in the balance based off of the kind of decisions and actions that the collective West will be making inside of Ukraine and how the conflict will be going on from this point. Nevertheless, we have also been able to hear of some other news. Speaking of some interesting developments with the United States, we actually were able to hear that a lot of the papers at the Elmendorf Joint Base were left behind after the meeting, and we actually got to see a little bit of what it looked like. First, we'll actually, these are both combined pictures. I'll show you all a couple of others that we have as well. This was the menu at the luncheon in honor of His Excellency Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation.
Did somebody get their hands on this? Did someone happen to leave it at a hotel printer or something?
Apparently so. Apparently it was found at a public printer at the Anchorage Hotel. So it appears, Mandy, that the military was racing around looking for available printers because apparently they didn't have enough of them in Elmendorf, and they used a public printer at an Anchorage hotel. But beyond that, let's look at the menu. Green salad with champagne vinaigrette. They tried to make this sound very nice, but honestly, that's just a normal salad with some vinaigrette dressing. And a duet of filet mignon with brandy peppercorn sauce and halibut Olympia, served with buttery whipped potatoes. They're not mashed potatoes, they're whipped, because when you become aristocratic enough, they're not mashed, they're whipped because they're your servant. And roasted asparagus, and then creme brulee.
Creme brulee, eh? This stuff does not sound very Russian.
Honestly, man, it doesn't even sound that high class. I mean, like, most of the stuff you can find in most any normal restaurant anywhere in America, like a filet mignon or a halibut, like it's not really anything extremely grand, but anyways, beyond that.
Where's the chicken Kiev at, though? Like, they weren't going to serve chicken Kiev, I guess. They don't serve that to the journalist.
Man, they only served that to the journalist to get the message across to the journalist. They didn't want to insult His Excellency Vladimir Putin. Also, calling him His Excellency, I mean, that's a big stretch, But anyways, beyond that, they then had the actual program itself laid out, at least how it was supposed to go, and this is how far we made it, and then what else was supposed to happen. So, first off, they were going to have the meeting at 11:30 to 12:10, so it was only supposed to last 40 minutes. It went well on beyond that. Then they were supposed to have an expanded meeting and working lunch in the conference room from 12:15 to 2:45. It's interesting, folks, how the meeting was only supposed to last 40 minutes, but the lunch was about 2.5 hours. So a little bit interesting with how the original timetable went. Then there was going to be a press conference prep for about 30 or 40 minutes or so. And then they were going to have a joint press conference for an hour. Then the president was going to bid Putin farewell. And then there was going to be another interview, apparently with Sean Hannity. And then there was going to be another, the departure was going to happen at 5:30. And then some other preparatory stuff after the president left was going to happen at 5:45. So a little bit of interest.
Wait a minute. You almost forgot. They were going to give a gift to Putin, by the way. I'm not sure if Putin got his gift or not, but it says right there at the very bottom, it says POTUS to President Putin, American bald eagle desk statue. So, apparently, I don't think he got his gift. I don't think he did. Because he didn't stay for the lunch. So I guess all the food went to waste. I'm sure some military guys probably ended up eating it. And also the bald eagle desk statue probably went on the desk of some commander at the base, I'd imagine, because I don't think Putin got it.
Yeah, I would have to say I don't think he got it. But we also have some other pictures here of the other pages that were found. We could see Witkoff was present. I don't know what that face was on his portrait there, but he was present. And then they had insert Le Putin meme picture. They had Horseface, and then they also had Yuri Ushakov, which y'all may remember almost was killed, I believe, by the bear right before the meeting. Then we also had the meeting itinerary again, and then they also had the seating arrangement for the lunch seating. So we can actually see all the Russians were on the left side of the table, and everyone else, including the president, were on the right side of the table. Interesting enough, if you look here, Besant was going to be present, actually, as well as Lutnick.
Probably for any economic deals that were going to be discussed, if they were hoping that was going to be the case, like maybe some Russian-U.S. joint economic deal or something. But yeah, plot twist, none of that panned out.
Also, I have to say this though. Thank God they didn't get to the luncheon, because if Hegseth was there, he might have accidentally linked all of them to a secret, secret signal chat or something like that. So luckily he wasn't, like, the luncheon didn't happen. Actually, I did not hear, folks, of the presence of Hegseth at all during this whole thing. He practically
No.
was just non-existent up there during this whole event. So if they made it to the luncheon, there may have been a major national security breach that possibly could have happened, maybe. But it didn't happen because they didn't get to the lunch. So crisis averted. But nevertheless,
I just hate that we weren't able to give Vladimir Putin that death statue, because you remember the last time the USSR gave us a gift in the United States? They gave, I think it was the president's office, a gift. It was like a wooden carved seal of the U.S. like seal and stuff like that, and it had within it had a very, very low tech but also very ingeniously designed basically listening device in it that used no batteries, it used no power, and it literally just resonated sound that it detected from like a very thin diaphragm to a makeshift microphone. And the Russians would have a van sitting outside. They would project this at the ambassador's office where the seal was actually located, and they could hear inside the room what was going on. It was super, super ingenious. Like, honestly, the engineering behind it was wild. But that's the last time they gave us a gift. It wasn't very good.
yeah, funnily enough, the reason why this was actually put up in the ambassador's office, and this was actually put up in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, by the way, just in case y'all didn't know.
Oh yeah,
It was
sorry.
it was presented as a gift, and let me make sure that I'm correct on that. I want to make sure it was concealed inside a gift. Yeah, the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. Yeah, so it was actually in the embassy in Moscow in the Soviet Union. But it was given, and the story behind it that was made, and this was during the Stalin era, was that this was actually a seal made for the ambassador as a gift by some orphans in an orphanage from the war. Like, all of these kids, at least according to the story, this isn't true. This whole thing was fabricated and made inside of an NKVD office somewhere. That's where they made this thing. But beyond that, the story that they presented to the ambassador, and the reason why I was put up in the office with a high amount of acclaim and praise, literally in his office where he would conduct sensitive meetings, is because they said that this was hand carved by orphans of the war whose fathers and mothers had been killed in the Great Patriotic War, and that they made it to him as a thanks for what the United States did to help out the Soviet Union during the war. That's why it was held with such high acclaim by the ambassador, and it was hung directly inside of his office where the sensitive meetings were held. I bet that's a fact that a lot of people didn't know about why in the world this thing ended up in his office specifically, is because the story that they gave about the origins of this thing was such a heartstring pulling story that it had to be put in a position of high honor right over his desk. So they would pull up a van, and using nothing electronic within the actual piece itself, they would project a radio broadcast of this thing of some type, and using a series of diaphragms and all other sorts of little non-complicated bits inside things, really hard to explain, they were actually able to listen in like a wiretap into everything that was being said in the ambassador's office, anything that was sensitive.
Well, when the Russians would pull the van up outside, they had like a dish, like a satellite style dish on the top of it that would, like, literally, it would project a beam of radio waves at the listening device in the seal. It would power the listening device, like from the radio waves that were blasted at it. There was like an antenna, like attached to the diaphragm on this listening device, and as they blasted the radio waves at it, it would power this thing. There's the antenna, I believe, right there, the little like stick thing that's going down. That's the antenna, and it was like really wild how it was designed. Super ingenious, and I don't think I've ever seen or heard anything like it since.
Yeah, it was an absolutely crazy sort of a design. The thing about the spycraft, however, folks, is that once one thing is uncovered, it's never usable again, because they'll be looking out for that again. So this was the only time that this was ever attempted. But it did work for years. This thing was undetected for the longest period of time, and then it was finally detected, and then they removed it and found out that it was a major security breach. Because this thing was in the office from the 4th of August of 1945 all the way up in 1951. So that thing was around in that office for about roughly 7 years, listening into everything.
And that was a terrible breach right there. Honestly, I'm not sure why we accept gifts at all from like foreign countries like that, especially enemy states. I don't even know why we do it. And even with friendly states, you got to be careful, because even friendly states spy on each other. Like, that's a known thing. We got caught, the United States did, spying on our allies like numerous times in the past, and it was a whole incident and everything. So like, it seems to me like putting gifts in like sensitive office spaces is probably something we probably shouldn't do, but I think they still do it anyway. I think they still put stuff in there.
Yeah, I think they do. Also, I saw someone say they put hinges on it. No, the hinges were put on after the fact to be able to pretty much split it open and show what was actually inside of it. It didn't have hinges originally. It was an entirely closed off wooden block. And so that's why no one suspected anything, because it looked like a solid piece of carpentry work, not something that had a listening device inside of it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least with how that worked. But it appears that we did not end up giving them the gift. But that was for some of the papers that did come out. Nevertheless, we also were able to hear another interesting fact, speaking of some developments that have been coming out of this today, that after the talks happened in Anchorage, the Russian stock market actually took a little bit of a tank there for a minute, and it looked like it wasn't really going too well. And it looks like a lot of people are talking about why in the world that would happen after a peace talk. Wouldn't a peace talk be the greatest thing that could have ever happened? Oh, wait, couldn't it be? Or is it not? And what are people thinking about that, Matthew? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So we did see immediately following the Alaska summit meeting, once they left, the Russian company's stocks, like across the board, dropped sharply after that summit. And why do you think that is? Because it was a pretty decent drop for their economy. So 62% said Russia fears the war economy collapsing if the war comes to an end, while 28% said Russia fears the war will continue on. And they saw the hope was waning after the meeting, and they figured, our economy is going to go to hell because Putin won't end the war. So let's dump our stocks. While 4% said, I think it's a normal change. And I believe what the case was, because remember, the version that Russia gets fed is much, much different than the version that we're getting told about in the West. Russia gets fed the propaganda story, which Putin would love his people to believe that he's a peacemaker and that he can somehow bring the thing to an end. And that was a story that was being propagated on Russian state media. So I believe the Russian investors thought, oh crap, because they know their economy is hinging on the war economy right now. And if that comes to an end, then their entire economy might come to an end and their whole stock market might plummet. So I think that's why they unloaded their stocks, because they were worried about the war coming to an end. But I think they might as well go ahead and rebuy those stocks, though, because I think it's probably not ending. But I'm with the 62%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree with the 62% as well. The Russian Federation's economy is entirely built around the war at this point, and if the war ends, the literal only thing that's keeping some parts of the economy alive collapses, and then everything collapses as a result of that. So I have a feeling that those people were somewhat wise visionaries that were trying to escape before the Russians would try and completely freeze the stock market and stop people from withdrawing their money from the banks and also selling their stocks. So I'd have to say that, at least in my opinion, I do believe the Russians do fear that the war economy would have been collapsing. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that in mind, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, including a little bit of news out of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, East Asia, and the Middle East, as well as all of the rest of the frontline news that we have from Ukraine and the damage that was accumulated in the Russian Federation. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure that we grab a couple of questions before we get into that whole rigmarole. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. And also, real quick, before we jump into our super chats, a real quick breaking news update out of Yemen, because, of course, there is an unfolding situation down there of airstrikes on the Houthis by the Israeli Air Force. So we are getting confirmation from Houthi member al-Assad, interesting name there. He said he confirms an attack in Yemen. He said that Israel is a criminal, bankrupt enemy targeting only service facilities and civilian infrastructure, electricity, and water. But also, that seems to ignore the fact that Houthis are literally a terrorist organization. So what a hypocrite that fellow is, al-Assad of all people. But they have confirmed it. There was an attack in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, and that's been confirmed by the Houthi Politburo, because apparently they're legit down there in the Yemeni government. But that's what we're hearing. But anyways, jumping away from that and jumping onto our super chats here, our first one goes to none other than Danny B. And thank you very much, Danny, for that $50 support, and we appreciate that very, very much. That is the largest super chat of the night, by the way. And he said, good evening, Forces. Chef Danny here, and I hope all is well with y'all. And every time we threaten someone and don't do anything about it in the United States, it just shows that we're full of empty threats and LOT, LSA.
And I'd agree with that, Danny B. I do think if massively for support, I would definitely agree with the idea that threats have to be followed through on. If you're not willing to follow through with a threat, then you don't make the threat. Threats are supposed to be followed through on all the time. The only thing that makes people afraid of the United States is when they know that our word is the law. If we say something, we're going to follow through on it. So if we make a threat, we are going to follow through on that threat. And so far over the past 6 months, There has been so many threats levied at the Russians that have not been followed through on, that all of them are full of hot air. It's not ever going to happen. And one thing that I have to say, folks, that I find incredibly odd, like, this is something that I have to say, it's just insanely odd to me, is that we say, well, we are not really doing anything to the Russians because they're a nuclear armed power, or technically some sort of a superpower of some kind, okay? So if that is our argument for saying this is why we're not following through on our threats, why in the world did we follow through on our threats on India and China, which have a far greater argument for being superpowers than Russia ever would? Like, let me just show y'all really quickly, because if we're talking about superpowers, and the Russians' economy counts, and their economy is hovering around 2 trillion. I mean, hell, based off of that, Germany is a superpower. I mean, Germany is a superpower equivalent to 2.5 Russias, nearly. Like, that's a superpower, if we're going off of that sort of a metric. But more importantly, look at India. I mean, India has a GDP of nearly 4 trillion. It's worth 2 Russias. It's, I believe at this point, the 3rd largest economy on the planet right now. Actually, no, it's the 4th largest economy on the planet. Or no, the 5th, actually. But anyways, beyond that. Then we have the Chinese, which have a GDP of nearly $19 trillion. It finally went up a little bit in 2024. They finally got those figures, yippee. But nevertheless, these countries, we are more than willing to throw massive tariffs on. If y'all remember earlier this year, we actually got up to nearly implementing a 175% tariff against the Chinese, which would have completely cut out about a cumulative, something along the lines of $600 billion worth of annual trade if those tariffs went through. Just completely cut it out. It would not exist anymore. We have a collective trade before the war with the Russians of, I think, $20 billion, which is insignificant, and their economy is minuscule. It's so small, it may as well be considered a minor power, or even at best a regional power. And also on top of that, China and India are nuclear armed, and China also has the capability, because it has a nuclear triad, to strike at the United States and destroy us outright in a nuclear strike. And we are more than willing to implement sanctions and tariffs against the People's Republic of China and India without blinking an eye or even thinking about the greater consequences of that. But with the Russians, we always hold off, and maybe, they might be some sort of a power to be reckoned with. It's like, why in the world is that the case? I mean, anyone looking at the statistics would know that messing with India or China would result in far more grief than it would with the Russians. Like, just even on the economic scale, much less the fact that the other two are also nuclear armed and can nuke our allies, at least within the regional area, or could nuke us, at least in the form of the Chinese. So I'd have to say that's one thing that I find really interesting, is that we will follow through with threats against the Chinese and the Indians, but we will not follow through with threats on the Russians. And for that reason, I have no idea why that's the case. Because if any of them should be the easiest to follow through with a threat on, it should be the Russians. We openly have a problem with them. Like the Chinese and the Indians, I mean, maybe you could make the argument that they're abstract threats. At least for now, they're not imminent threats to the West. And you could, waffle around on that a little bit and maybe get away with it. But with the Russians, they are an imminent threat, not only to the United States, but to the whole of Europe right now, and our sphere of influence inside of Europe. If anyone should be easy to implement additional sanctions and tariffs against, it is the Russians. There's no one else that argument could be made for but them. So I just don't know why in the world that's not the case, and I also don't know why we're pretty much hanging out the Americans' ability to follow through on our word to die for a country that is militarily and economically insignificant in the modern age. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support, Danny B. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And also, I gotta say, someone said the scary subs. China actually has scary subs as well. Like, they literally have their own version of the Delta IV class, which I believe they call the Type 94 class submarine. Let me go check really quickly, and it is the Type 94 class submarine. They actually have their own ballistic missile carrying nuclear powered submarines that do carry ICBMs, just like the Russian Delta IV variants. And let me go show y'all the Delta IV, just so that way y'all can see. Yeah, it's a ripoff again, because I want to make sure that we make that clear. It's a ripoff. It's literally the same thing. They just call it different. But the Chinese also have these as well. So if we're scared of the Russians nuking us, we should be scared. We should even be more scared of the Chinese nuking us because they technically have an economy big enough to be able to build a lot of nukes pretty quickly. Russia would have a pretty hard time even paying their soldiers decent wages or the wages they were promised with the little amount of money that they have economically. So I find that always to be a little bit odd. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Huge thanks to you, though, once again, Danny B, for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, let's jump right into our next super chat, which goes to another channel legend. This time it is the Martian. And thank you very much, Martian, for that $51 support. And we do appreciate that very much. And also, thank you for persevering through the glitches, because he told me he had a glitch trying to throw one in earlier. So thank you very much for going again, because sometimes YouTube gets a little bit weird sometimes when it comes to the super chats. It's sort of finicky sometimes, but we're glad it got sorted, and thank you for that support. And he said, why doesn't Ukraine cut loose the F-16s and Mirages?
That is a great question. And the reason why they're not cutting loose is because of spare parts availability, at least from what we know. In terms of flight hours, it costs around $20,000 per hour to keep an F-16 in the air. It costs about the same for a Mirage 2000. It's around $18,000 an hour. And that generally is consumed in fuel costs, ground repairman wages, and also spare parts to keep those aircraft running. It's an incredibly expensive venture to keep those kinds of aircraft in the sky. But the reason why it's the most expensive, it's not the fuel or the cost of the ground crews that keep those F-16s running. It's actually the spare parts. And from what we understand, the Europeans and the United States are keeping a very small flow of spare parts flowing into Ukraine for the Mirage 2000s and the F-16s, which makes it very difficult to justify the exorbitant kind of resource expenditure to keep those things in the air 24/7 all the time, fighting like hell, because generally they are not going to have enough spare parts to be able to do that. Those aircraft will break down, and once they land from those operations, and it's quite clear that something is broken down, they pretty much have to sit around and then wait for that slow trickle of spare parts to arrive to then replace those parts and then get the aircraft back into aerial operation. Also on top of that, all F-16s do have, also all aircraft in the world, do have a set amount of flight hour times that they are survivable through. And once you start to exceed those flight hour times, those aircraft become incredibly dangerous to fly because there may be stress cracks or fractures within the airframes that will start to create critical failures, like the wings ripping off or anything else along those lines, that you might not really be able to detect, because micro fractures and stress fractures are practically impossible to detect unless you use incredibly advanced sensor technology, which can cost in the tens of millions. And generally, most people don't do that. They just go off of the expected lifespan of the airframe, through all the stress testing that was done by the manufacturer back in the day, and then they go, okay, it's been in the flight, it's been in air for this many thousands of hours, it is old and needs to be retired. All of these F-16s that were provided to Ukraine already had lived a full life in service inside of the Dutch Air Force and other air forces of Europe, and they're incredibly old airframes. Some of these were actually some of the first export F-16s sent out into Europe in the 80s, the very early 80s. So with that in mind, these aircraft are already near to the end of their life. They have a few hundred hours left on the airframes before they're completely spent. And also on top of that, the spare parts are flowing in at a trickle, so that way if something breaks down, they kind of have to just sit around and wait on a back order to get the spare parts to repair the plane. So that's generally why you see that the F-16s and the Mirages are used seldomly, and they're not put into risky situations because they have to use them very sparingly given the condition of these aircraft and the availability of the spare parts and logistical supply chains that would keep these aircraft running, being run on a shoestring budget for the larger part. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least from what I know right now, Martian. And I hope that does answer the question incredibly well. And I keep on seeing people in the chat tonight saying that we're funded by the CIA. I don't know what's up with that tonight. I have no clue. It's apparently a new bot kind of a thing, I think. But we are not funded or affiliated with the Central Intelligence Agency or any other national security agency or Department of Homeland Security project of the United States government. We have never been involved in it, and if we were, we would not have to run this thing off of crowdfunding because we would be funded by the U.S. government. That's why we have
Exactly.
to, that's why we had to take in super chats, folks. We are not CIA funded or affiliated. So if you're actually coming in, you're like, are they CIA funded or affiliated? No. And if you think that it sounds like I know what I'm talking about pretty well on air, thank you. It was a lot of reading and a lot of books. But beyond that, we're not CIA affiliated in any way. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support The Martian and helping this channel to keep on running and being a legend of the channel and an old guard as well. And with that, it is time for us to get on into the final question of the segment and then on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, and our last one here goes to Moity Movies, who puts in a $40 donation, and thank you very much, Moity, for that support, and it's good to see you once again, by the way, and we do appreciate you supporting the channel yet again. He said, you guys continue to be an excellent and a must-watch for your detailed and passionate show, but for those of us who usually watch the recording, could you remove the first 13 minutes when posting? We know this part.
And I thank you for the support. We could try and remove the first 13 minutes, possibly, but generally we don't really do a lot with that because those sorts of edits, at least in the YouTube software, can take hours. And the computers have to be running and pretty much focusing on that entirely, at least from my experience, for the multiple hours that can take. Usually it takes about 2 or 3 hours to do a simple cut or an edit like that in the YouTube editing software, and that's generally why we don't do that on most, if everything, on our streams. We could try, but also a lot of people really do like the music, and I know a lot of people are familiar with it, and you can pretty much go and see all of the music in single videos that we've uploaded of each song here on the channel, but we generally keep them in because a lot of people do like the music and would not like us to remove them because they like to hear the patriotic tunes. But I do thank you so much for the support, and we'll look into it, but right now I'm actually seeing a lot of pushback on that in the chat because a lot of people are like, I don't know about that, I wouldn't want to do that at all. I like the music. So I think we'll probably hold off on that, and really the easiest thing to do is just fast forward beyond it. The intros every night, usually these days, are about 8 minutes and 42 seconds long. So if you fast forward about 9 minutes in, you have made it to the beginning of the stream. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep it rolling. And so with that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have for the night. And we still have a good, considerable amount of news. And moving on into the rest of the news that we have, starting in East Asia, working into the Middle East, and then back into Ukraine, we were able to hear that the People's Republic of China is starting to unveil more of their modern military tech. They have shown off their latest...
Wait. Also, by the way, before you get into this real quick, I got to get this out of the way because I have polls on these other topics, and right now there's a poll clogging my screen right now. So real quick, to interrupt this news coverage real quick, we need to go over one quick poll. It says, was the real Putin at the Alaska meeting or a body double? Because a lot of people were asking about this, and I only ran it because the audiences was asking for it. So 59% say it was the real Putin, and 42% say it was a Putin body double. So me personally, I believe it was the real Putin. The real Putin had to be the one speaking to the U.S. president, or otherwise it would have been pretty obvious that it was a fake one. So I believe it was the real one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that was the real McCoy. That was the real Putin there, because no one else can ramble like an idiot like Putin. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the rest of the news. And we were able to see 2 new vehicles that the People's Republic of China has shown to us today. We've been able to see the brand new, spanking new LZ-171. Look at it. That thing looks...
Oh, yeah.
That thing honestly kind of looks like a CV-90.
It kind of does, except it looks a little bit AI generated or something. Like, I don't know, the lines don't look right on the sides of it. Like, is it just me, or do the lines look like it's fake?
It's real. I mean, like, this thing is legitimately real. Like, oddly enough, I'm not kidding, man. It looks just like a CV-9030. Like, let me see if I can get that picture larger. Dang, that's a tiny picture. A bigger picture would be in order here. Come on, man. Oh, well, that's a War Thunder picture. I'm trying to find a real picture of this damn thing. Here we go. It looks a lot like that. Like, it's almost like a copy, but the turret is a little bit smaller and more rounded.
And also, it seems like it's missing parts and bits, like vents or something on the front of it. Like, it's missing stuff. It's like it's a partially rendered, like, video game, like, tank or something. Like, it looks like it's not complete.
The Chinese really don't clutter the outside of their tanks with much of anything or armored fighting vehicles, which is a little bit odd because what always clutters up the front of Western armored personnel carriers or infantry fighting vehicles like the CV-90 are these little pad-looking things. Like, it almost looks like it's a part of the paint, but what those are traction surfaces, so that way you don't bust your teeth out when you're climbing on the front of this thing, so that way it's not slick like normal steel. The Chinese never do that, and the fronts of theirs are always extremely slick. Like like an extreme safety hazard, honestly. But also it appears that it has some kind of a a heavier caliber autocannon, some kind of a 25 or a 30 millimeter. It also appears to possibly have a trophy system or smoke dischargers on the top of the turret, and an advanced optical sensor directly mounted above the gun, possibly to give the gunner or the commander a better optical feed. But considering that there's no hatches on this thing, I think that the entire crew is actually down here in the hull, kind of like a T-14 Armada type design. But it very
Is it possible? Is it possible that these are phonies? Like, I know that's a bit of a long shot because we don't know for a fact. But since this is like some of their newer vehicles, could it be that maybe it's a mock-up just to sort of like, I guess you could say, fool the West into thinking they have new stuff when they really don't have it yet?
It could be a prototype. This thing isn't revolutionary, though. This thing literally fills the role of a CV-9030. It has no ATGMs from what we can tell. It only has an autocannon. So as far as its potency on the battlefield, this thing is like an armored light infantry support vehicle. It's not going to be anything grand. So even if this thing is new, it's not game-changing in any sort of way. It's just giving the Chinese another infantry fighting vehicle on top of the 9 others that they have, that they can boast that they have in their arsenal. So nothing incredibly groundbreaking here, but still somewhat new. Probably a prototype, though, because we've only seen this for the first time. Then we also got to see the backside of the thing, which, once again, it's got the same layout as the CV-9030. I feel like they just ripped off the CV-90s entirely to make this thing. Then we also got to see in this picture what is apparently the new LZ-183 main battle tank. This thing appears to have some sort of machine gun mounted in an automated turret, once again with a gunner's sight or a commander's sight at the direct back of the turret. There appears to be no hatches, at least on the turret, except for one, possibly to reach the gun's breech or to reload the autoloader inside the turret. So it appears that the crew is entirely inside the hull again. We can see some sort of protective armor package that has been mounted onto the sides of the main battle tank. The engine bay is insanely small, like insanely small, to the point that it's minuscule. So it either has some sort of extremely compact and really powerful engine, or it's an extremely compact and really weak engine. It also appears.
I don't think China is going the way of the eco engine, or like the eco boost, or whatever they want to call it. It's a little four cylinders, four bangers, or whatever they're trying to put in all these new trucks and stuff like that. I really doubt China could give a damn about emissions, so they might just be cheaping out on their engines. That could be the main reason.
Yeah, that could be. We can also see that this specific main battle tank is equipped with a trophy active protection system, which it appears, with this in mind, it actually appears that this APC does have a trophy active protection system or something along those lines. It's an APS active protection system. You can actually see the sensors right there on the turret along with the dischargers, and you can actually see smaller grenade dischargers below the APS system or the APS detector. What these are designed to do is to make the tank a little bit more survivable in the modern world. If an FPV drone flies at one of these tanks at a fast enough speed, if this thing is programmed properly, this little detector will pick it up, and this little turret, pretty much up here on top of the turret, will swivel nearly instantaneously and fire off one of these charges, which is pretty much just a whole bunch of shrapnel at the drone, and shoot it down. It also can do the same thing with anti-tank guided missiles, and really any other kind of missile ordnance that is fired at the tank. The only thing that the APS systems cannot protect from in the modern day is armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot rounds, which are pretty much tungsten darts. They really can't do anything against tungsten darts, but beyond that, they can generally stop most, if not everything else, from directly hitting the tank. So it appears that both the IFV and the main battle tank are actually outfitted with this, and it appears that the main gun of the tank is most likely still the conventional 125mm main guns that are ubiquitous across the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation. So I hope that covers that well. And we also got to see this other thing, which I have a lot of questions about beyond what this thing is. This is apparently China's laser air defense system.
Oh my God, what the hell is that? Is that like a Prevo bus or something like that? They've converted into like some type of like janky looking military. What the hell is that? I mean, this is janky looking. This is real janky. It looks like a train like on wheels.
Bro, it's le brick. The
Man,
brick.
really? This is awful.
Also, man, here's my question, okay? It's a military vehicle, right? So it eventually will end up going off-road. So how does it go off-road with so little ground clearance? Like, it's going to get stuck on anything.
This thing is like the embodiment of a Temu truck or something like that. Like it really is. Why the hell did somebody put a picture of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile on the right though? Like what's the? I don't see the comparison between those two things. One has a big wiener sitting on top of it, and one of them is like just a unrendered looking like Temu truck. But this thing is hideous, man. This is rough.
Bro, this is the Battlefield 6 open beta with the glitches. Like, this is what this is, bro. But apparently what this vehicle is, it is actually China's first attempt at a laser-based air defense system that is mobile. So the little tarp that's covering the top is actually covering some kind of a turret that actually has a laser system on board. And the whole vehicle pretty much carries the power bank and computer systems to be able to operate the laser system. So that's what this is. But my thing, though, folks, is that if that's the case, why the hell did they set the whole power bank and operating system so low to the ground where this thing has no clearance? Why didn't they just set it all higher up on a chassis with greater ground clearance? Like, that just would have made more sense.
Yeah, really. Someone said this is the ghetto mobile. Honestly, I mean this thing is tough right here. I'm not gonna lie. This is pretty tough. Like I'm like one of these people that believes in function over form when it comes to military equipment. It obviously I would like my military equipment to at least look somewhat remotely menacing. This right here is just a disgrace. Like it really is. Like the enforcer was saying, they have ground clearance they designed into the front of it. Like the front has a pretty clear angle of attack and can climb over stuff, but once it climbs over the front of the stuff and it slams into that middle portion right there that is so low to the ground like a low rider, that thing is going to get beached like a whale.
Hold up, Matthew. Did Elon design this thing? It looks like a Cybertruck, honestly.
Oh no, it couldn't have been Elon. This has one too many lines on it for it to be a Cybertruck.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Even this thing is more stylized than a Cybertruck. Man, dude, people in China, man, they be driving around in Cybertruck Deluxe.
Honestly though, like it would be effective camouflage if you like took the sides of like a Cybertruck and put it on this, and then you polished the metal up to be completely reflective like a perfect mirror. That would probably be an excellent camouflage, really.
Yeah, that would be great. You know, man, I can already see Kadyrov getting one of these things and using his bricked up Tesla technicals that don't work anymore, that were shut off, like around this thing, bruh. It would work. It would work really well. But this thing is hideous. But these are some of the new weapon systems that China leaked to the public today through their social media systems. And we also were able to hear that there was more Chinese activity in the Strait, which is still continuing. But it doesn't seem to be any large amount. And we also were able to hear, folks, just to, put away any fears, that Xi Jinping actually told the president just today on a phone call. It was a little short when he called up and said, hello, Mr. President.
What's up, Beijing?
He said, "What's up, Beijing? Hello." And then he said that apparently they're not going to invade Taiwan as long as he's the president. So they pinky promised that, so we are okay now. They're not going to be invading until at least after 2028. So we're all good, everyone. The Chinese gave us their word, and we all know that the Chinese are, they live and die on their word. So they're not going to be invading Taiwan anytime soon. Don't be scared.
Wait a minute, I thought the Chinese playbook said deception is key to warfare.
You're not supposed to say that part out loud, Matthew.
Oh.
Like, you're not supposed to say that part out loud. But yeah, that's actually crazy. Like the whole thing, like that they do with the psychological warfare and the non-war military activities, like in Maoist thinking, generally relies on deceiving your enemy. So, yeah, take that for what you will. Like one of their main shticks is deceiving the enemy, and they tell the president, "Oh, we pinky promise that we're not going to invade Taiwan while you're president." It's like, you can promise they're going to invade Taiwan while he's president at this point. That is one of the worst that's one of the worst deceptions I've ever seen so far, at least at this point. So I think they're going to be invading Taiwan by 2027 or 2028, guaranteed at this point. Like, that's probably happening. But anyways, moving on from that. and on out of East Asia. It's time for us to get on into the Middle East, where we were able to hear inside of Tehran that the Iranians have issued another threat to the United States and Israel. Apparently, there's a Studio Ghibli AI thing that was made down here. But beyond that, the General Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces has stated today that we warned the United States and the Zionist entity of the consequences of any new adventure against Iran. I don't know why the hell they all keep unilaterally calling this an adventure. Like, when we go to war, this isn't an adventure. This is business. Like, I don't know if they get that. This isn't the Lord of the Rings. We're out here on business. And when the United States ends up bombing the Iranians, like they did in Midnight Hammer, that's not an adventure. We're just trying to make sure that they don't get a nuke to kill us all with here in America. So I don't really think they're understanding that side of things. But it does appear that the Iranians are once again putting out the bold threats and claims. While they're doing that, Israel just bombed their terrorist force in western Yemen while we were live on air, and they're also continuing their operations inside of the Gaza Strip against Hamas. We actually were able to see an Apache gunship of the Israeli Defense Forces flying over the Gaza Strip earlier today. In Israel, these aren't called Apaches, these are actually called the Paten. And that's actually... That's the chain gun firing, the 30mm chain gun. Why is it called a chain gun? It's got something to do with the linkage in the rounds that the cannon fires. It's weird, but it's technically called a chain gun. I like those. Apache chain gun. Let me go here. See, it's called a chain gun. Why? I really don't know. But this is what it is.
It fires chains at people.
Man, bruh, they call this thing the chain gun because you'd be wishing that they was hitting you with chains after this thing got done with you. But beyond that, the 30mm autocannons do have a menacing sound. Pretty interesting stuff. Also, the muzzle brake on this thing is wicked sick looking. I love the muzzle brake on it. But outside of that, we were able to hear that apparently they were continuing to conduct their operations, and apparently there was some sort of a little firefight that happened at the Egypt-Israeli border, apparently with some Egyptian drug smugglers, which I don't really know what the Egyptian drug smugglers would be smuggling. Like, I don't really know what, like, the big, like, items in Egypt are. But apparently they got in a firefight with the Israeli Defense Forces, and in the midst of it, the Israelis fired off an illumination shell, also called a star shell, to be able to light up the surrounding area in the midst of the firefight.
Oh yeah, those friggin' Egyptian drug smugglers, those bastards always causing problems down there.
Man,
it's weird that we just hear about the drug smugglers out of the blue all of a sudden. And also Israel mentioned it like it was no big deal. Like, oh yeah, those pesky drug smugglers again. It's like, I thought they had the border secure. Like, how all of a sudden are these drug smugglers like a sudden thing?
I don't even know, dude. And like the way everyone just went about it, they're like, oh, those Egyptian drug smugglers. It's like what? It's like, this is news to me. I've never really heard of Egyptian drug smugglers before. It's like, where the hell do they come from? Let me go pull it up really quickly. What the hell do they like do? Like Egyptian drug trade. What the hell do they trade in even? Like,
surely they have a better name than just Egyptian drug smuggler. Like, there's got to be a better name than that. Surely.
Oh, no way. So their big thing in Egypt is heroin. Like, what?
Oh.
Dude, I didn't expect that when someone said it was probably opium and hashish. And I was thinking, yeah, that would be like a very regional kind of a thing. You know, opium and hashish are incredibly common throughout that region as like naturally produced things. If you know anything about Afghanistan, that was a huge cash crop for them. But weirdly enough, it's not either of those. It's just heroin. So a little bit wild. So, bro, they're like the rednecks. Like, bro, they're crossing the border into the Gaza Strip with that. Like, that's a bit of a shock, honestly, folks. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on from that little bit of news down at the Gaza border. And we also were able to hear of Israel's further demands today. In a statement responding to reports of Hamas' renewed interest in a phased hostage ceasefire deal, the Prime Minister Netanyahu's office stated that Israel will only will agree to a deal in which all hostages are freed at once and all of Israel's conditions to the end of the war are met. These conditions include demilitarizing Gaza and disarming Hamas, continued Israeli control of the Gaza perimeter, and the installation of a new government for Gaza that is not controlled by Hamas or the Palestinian Authority that will live in peace with Israel. So it does appear that the Israelis are going with the concept of total war and total victory against Hamas forces inside the Gaza Strip at the moment. Meanwhile, there was an explosion inside of Damascus, apparently from some sort of a jalopy. You can actually see it right there. It looks to be an old I don't even know what that is. Like, I would like to say it's a Volkswagen Beetle, but it blew up in the middle of the city.
Yeah, that's no Beetle.
And then we have another clip. Very American-sounding sirens, honestly. Anyways, we also were able to hear Poseidon was conducting reconnaissance around the area of the Alawite coast of Syria. So it does appear that that was also going on today as well within the Middle East. But still, a lot of people have been talking about what's been going on in the Middle East, and also something I didn't include in the news tonight is that Iran did declare that there will be water shutoffs starting tomorrow for Tabriz amidst the major water crisis, meaning that the idea of tap water for the Iranian people is, I guess, going up in Tabriz. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So Iran is facing a crisis of significant proportions right now. It's really a really serious crisis, actually, all joking aside. Iran has declared water shutoffs for starting tomorrow for Tabriz, which is a major Iranian city, amidst the major water crisis. And what are your thoughts? 42% said Iran's going to let the people dehydrate, while 34% said Iran will probably collapse due to this crisis, and 15% said Iran will likely receive assistance. So I think they're going to be in some trouble because Iran has fallen into a drought. They've also apparently don't have water to pull on from under the ground tables. So they're in some serious trouble right now. Where Iran's going to get water from is something that I have no clue about. The Iranian president is also confused about where he's going to get assistance from, and he's begging on national television still to this day for help. But the one thing that is clear, though, is if it comes down to it, the Iranian government is just going to let their people dehydrate. That's going to be the bottom line, and it's going to be a huge humanitarian crisis basically starting tomorrow, because I don't know where the people are getting their water from starting tomorrow. So I'm on the 39%. I think this is about to be a humongous humanitarian crisis and a lot of suffering coming out of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Iranians are most likely going to let the people dehydrate. The upper officials will certainly have water. They're most likely going to start issuing out water in rations, highly likely, but they will let the majority of the public dehydrate if they have to. That's why I generally assume. Although that's not going to be taken too well, because generally, while famines are one thing, dehydration is a whole other animal, and that will lead people to revolt far quicker than a famine would. So it looks like they're going to be in some trouble. But anyways, with that, I hope that is addressed the best we can, at least with what's going on inside the Middle East. And moving on from that and on back up into the Russian Federation, we're going to be covering all of the aftermath of the strikes of Ukraine's largest drone attack of the war that we're finally getting. First off, we were able to see satellite footage of the Olya 4 sitting sadly in the Volga River, sank and defeated. There it is right there. It's that little piece of red sticking up out of the water. Womp womp. Moving on from that, we also got to hear that another fire has broken out at the Volgograd refinery, spontaneously combusted. How in the hell does this stuff happen? I don't know. But it wasn't even a drone attack today. It just actually caught on fire as a result of the damage from yesterday.
No need to call in a drone strike. Spontaneous combustion's a new phenomenon. Heavy in Russia.
I gotta be honest with you. I like Burger King, and I also like watching these refineries burn. Man.
That's probably your most L take of the century, bro.
Oh, yeah? Well, you know what's going to be real L? Your reception after I came on the show. Oh. Bro, what the hell were they listening to, bro? Were they listening to someone getting, like, mutilated on the speaker, bro? That guy said, no, let's see. It's like, bro, what the hell? Like, bro, that sounds like
a direct line to the devil in their car. It sounds like,
bro, they got a direct line to Lavrov. That's all it is. But anyways, you see the fire here as well. Man, I gotta tell y'all, this looks hellish out here in Volgograd.
oh wow, pollution.
Man, that cloud looks different than the rest. But anyways, moving on from that and out of that area, it's time for us to move on to the satellite pictures showing us the damage. That's a lot of damage, and Flex still ain't fixing it. But moving on from that and out of Volgograd, we also were able to hear of the remnants of the let me see here, what was it? Oh yeah, the elastic gunpowder plant in Ryazan. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that the building was elastic much, and they're picking up the rubble and debris of the gunpowder plant today.
I blew this gunpowder plant in half.
I just blew up this gunpowder plant. Like,
Watch the magic of Flex Seal fix this gunpowder plant. We're gonna ride it on the river.
Billy Mays here with OxyClean. We can clean away a Russian gunpowder plant with ease. Like, oh, man.
But for a limited time only. Half the plant gets wiped out with no charge.
Man, you get one gunpowder plant, you get 2 free. Just call the number. Oh, man.
The number is Zelensky's phone number. Call him up and he'll give you the coupon of the century.
Bro, the building is still smoking from the heat.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Honestly, you know, last time rocks were smoking like that, it was a bad day in Ukraine, I'll tell you. A bad day at Chernobyl.
Man, there's no graphite on the floor. That's generally the end of the clip. As you can all tell, the elastic gunpowder plant is gone. We also get to see that the pumping station in Bryansk is also gone as well. That thing was freaking obliterated. Whatever drone hit it had a lot of explosive force, and also resulting fire burned down a large part of the remaining bits of the pumping station. Here's what it looks like before. Here's what it looks like after. So this pumping station is out of action, at least temporarily. Outside of that, we also were able to hear of other actions from the Ukrainian front lines today. Yippee! Let's get into it. Moving on down into the area of the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see that the Ukrainians are continuing to attack Russian supplies heading down the Rilisk Highway.
Тут, короче, хуёвая ситуация.
It's like hell on earth out here.
По машине сейчас отработала, но не сработала.
That's the realest highway right there. That's the highway right there you don't want to drive down. Honestly, that looks like the road of death that the Ukrainians created basically at the very beginning. You remember when the Russians were trying to bring that whole convoy like down the road? I can't remember where it was, like near the beginning of the war. You know what I'm talking about? It got like stopped and stuck, and the Ukrainians started slamming it.
You're talking about that the 40-mile long convoy outside of Kyiv, aren't you?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, it just got slammed.
Bro, honestly, bro, listen to this clip though.
Тут, короче, хуёвая ситуация. По машине сейчас
It's like someone out there yelling, dude. It almost sounded like breaking news. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. But anyways, moving on from that and on out of that clip and further on down into the Sumy area, we also got to see a little Russian artillery piece that was stuck in the middle of a sinking bridge get obliterated by the Ukrainian 47th Makarov. But we can see the there it goes. All artillery. Finna take Shouty to the creek. Man, they were toasting in the creek. But nice to see the 47 Magura doing its work. Moving on out of that and down into our location of notes, we've got a couple. Starting off, we got to see an armor cage on a Bradley. This is a new armor modification that the Ukrainians made.
Is that really going to make a difference? I mean, it looks pretty cool, but is it really going to help?
I don't know, but will this video help you decide better?
Oh yeah, let's see it. A demo. Look at this.
That engine is sick sounding.
It does sound good. What type of engine? Let's see here. What type of engine? Bradley engine. Let's see. It is a Cummins diesel. I thought it sounded familiar. That sounds like a damn good engine right there. 600 horsepower right there. But let's see. What's the torque on that engine? I was trying to figure that out because diesel is known for having loads of torque. Let's see here.
Oh, it's a torque master.
Dang it. It's not. Also, excuse me there for a second. I slipped up there. But let's see here. It doesn't say the torque right off the bat. Let's see here. Dang. It's 600 horsepower, though. I'm sure it's got plenty of torque. That thing sounds great.
Oh, yeah. Let's listen to it again. I just love the sound of it. Oh, that's great.
America.
Man. And the turret still slews properly, too, which is pretty impressive, even with the added weight. But moving on from that and out of that little clip, we also got to see a Ukrainian MiG-29 going to the liquor store. Man, me on my way to the liquor store. It's by the way, just to explain, folks, it's operating from a highway in Ukraine. That's why it's driving past this person's front gate at their house. Because the Ukrainians actually can operate these sorts of Soviet-era aircraft from highways. You can also operate Western aircraft from highways as well, as long as you keep them clear of any sort of debris. But that's what you're actually seeing right there. But that is Zelensky on his way to the liquor store right there. He's like, it's my day off. Time to go get some nice Jägermeister, Bliet. And there he goes. He's on his way.
Did you show the meme of Zelensky flying over the Putin meeting, by the way? Did you show that on Twitter?
No.
I happened to repost it.
No,
Let me go
I didn't.
grab that. I got to go grab it real quick. You got to show this real quick. We had a real view showing what happened in the sky that made Putin look up at the sky so worried yesterday. It was really quite a remarkable sight. I just put under our likes tab, by the way, so show people what really happened on that day, that fateful day in Alaska at the summit. There it is. Look at that. Someone even animated it over there. It's hilarious. This was Zelensky flying in. It wasn't a B-2. It was Zelensky in the Ukraine drone can right here. That's what it was.
Bruh, it's a work of art. Like, honestly, it's an absolute work of art. But moving on from that and on into our next bit, we also got to see this picture of a Ukrainian Challenger 2, which these things look sick. Really nice main battle tank. I like them a lot. I think they're cool. But moving on from that and on out of that little clip, we also got to see the Russians attempting to cross an anti-tank ditch with a stick. How does it go? Poorly. Well, you see, oh, Bliet, I'm going to fall. Ah! And then he fell right into the ditch.
Dumbass.
Sprained his ankle. What a goof. But moving on from that, we also got the Russian casualty report. And holy smokes, Matthew, is that 2 Bobcats?
Oh my gosh. 2 Bobcat skid steers. Not with 2, she's not. Not with 2, she's not. She's not going to handle it now, Captain. But I tell you what, 2 Bobcats, I'd love to see it. But tell us more.
Look, people, we have to stop the grilling. It's absolutely unreal. I put a steak on the grill. Well done. Who the hell cooks well done? I like to have medium rare or medium, or maybe medium well sometimes. Only a couple of times. But having it cooked well done, we have to stop the grilling. We have to talk to the guy on the grill. We have to come up with a ceasefire. He's got to stop burning these steaks. But beyond that, Miss D. Sekiro the Records did state that troop losses. I'm turning into like Scooby-Doo. Like every single L is turning into an R. I'm like troop losses. Troop losses rise over 1,000, but the average is below. Tanks above average and rare special equipment makes second appearance in 2 days. And we were able to hear that over the past 24 hours, 1,010 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed. We also were able to hear that 2 APCs were also destroyed, along with 137 supply trucks, 6 main battle tanks, 42 artillery pieces, 152 drones, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, a pretty decent day. Moving on from that and on into the next clip further on down the way, it's time for us to get back to the front. Moving on up into the Kupiansk area, we were able to see the Achilles targeting and destroying Russian forces near to the Kupiansk-Veslovy front. And I just saw someone in the chat say, "Are you guys drinking tonight?" Not absolutely. We're the drunk on life. It's a great time to be alive. You gotta sit there, you gotta count your blessings, you gotta be very happy for when you have them, because one day you might not.
I'm sorry, excuse me, but be quiet. It's my time to speak. And listen here, lightweight. The man's name is Hodgkin. It sounds a lot like that lymphoma that I've heard about. You know, my miso book, you know, the whole non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, you know, it's a bad thing, terrible thing, old-fashioned thing. You don't want to catch it. It's bad stuff.
I gotta be honest with you, that Hodgkin's lymphoma, terrible stuff, about as bad as arterial thrombosis. Also really bad. Why does that sound fun to say, though? Thrombosis. Like, when you say that, it's like a funny name, but it's not a great thing to have. But beyond that, I do have to say that we're not drunk. We're just drunk on life. We're very happy to be here. We're always happy to be here. If we were running a show, we weren't happy to be here. A lot of people would not be around for long. They would leave really quickly. They go, the ratings are dropping. Sir, the ratings are dropping. They're doing terribly. What are we going to do? Well, we're definitely not going to sound sad. That would be very bad. But beyond that, we can see the Ukrainians continuing to hit the Russian forces within this area and doing a pretty good job at it. We can also see them knocking out this already disabled main battle tank. And we can see that they were able to get 1 main battle tank, 2 MTLBs, and another MTLB. Very nice to see. Moving on from that and further down the line and into our next clip, in Kremenna, we were able to see the Russians also getting hit by the 63rd Mechanized Brigade, which is still operating around the Severonsky Forest.
Mill Beta is not activated. That's because they have alpha Chad in activation. They can't activate both at the same time. You can either be mil beta or mil alpha, and they are mil alpha all the way.
What color is your FPV? Oh, man. But they slammed them dead on the nail. We can see them going for another here. Oh, right in the engine bay.
Damn.
Right up the exhaust pipe.
Someone said, you guys are a riot tonight. No, sir. No riots. We don't
We are a
support riots.
lawful assembly,
We don't support
sir.
riots. I want to pull out that soundboard so bad, but I've been told it sounds cheesy.
We can't do the soundboard. Like, I'm sorry, we can't do the soundboard.
I'm like fighting what they call it, the
Demons.
fighting the demons, or fighting what they say when you like the irresistible urge or whatever. Like I don't know what the meme is on that, but y'all know what I'm talking about. I hope.
I don't know, man. I just think the people call them the demons or something. But we also got to see the Russian forces getting hit by the 19th Army Corps near to the area of Konstantinivka. This is kind of near Chasiv Yar, and we can see them, of course, slamming the Russians the best they can. Look at them go.
It's literally smoking down the way.
Man,
I
I guess
think it's red.
The water is blue.
That's right.
Oh, damn. That thing's turning into a barbecue. I guess you could say.
Intrusive thoughts. That's everybody knew what I was talking about. I knew it. I knew people were going to know what I was talking about. I'm not nuts yet, but it's intrusive thoughts. That's what it was. The intrusive thoughts. I'm about to click the soundboard, whether I want to or not, but I'm going to hold back.
Yeah, honestly, Matthew, I feel like it's that Seinfeld episode where he was with his girlfriend, and like for some reason they were making fun of her stomach, and he was like, "Hello." I feel like you're like that right now, where she's like, "You gotta quit. It's either the voice or me." And then he went to her room after he made the decision, and she's like, "Jerry," and he went, "Hello," and then she closed the door in his face, and he went, "La la la," and walked away. But anyways, moving on from that and down into the area of Donetsk, we also get to see the water is brown. It's not blue anymore. It's now brown.
It looks like V8 vegetable juice or something. It really has the same consistency, color, and everything. Like it went from iron being in the water, like contaminating the water. Now it looks like they've got straight up rusty pipes messing up the water. And also, look at that. One of those bottles right there, one of the Kool-Aid bottles, is dark red, like deep fruit punch. The one on the right is V8 vegetable juice, and the one in the bucket is filling up with some river water. This is nasty as hell.
Ew, that's nasty. Man, it's gross, really. I'd hate to be in Donetsk right now. This is actually a severe water crisis at the moment. We are assuming maybe a couple of million people may be affected by this at the moment, but it is a really nasty sort of situation. Beyond the fact that the water is absolutely laughable in quality, this actually has some severe implications behind it. But moving on from that and out of that little development in Donetsk and on towards Velika Novosilka, we did get to see the Ukrainians in the Presidential Brigade, well, actually the 3rd Battalion Presidential Brigade of the Balava unit, striking and hitting some Russian forces. This Presidential Brigade is a little bit different than the other one that's a part of the 1st National Guard Corps.
Also, by the way, I will say some people were saying, oh, look, Russia's having the same problem that Iran's having. No, Russia's still got it 100 times better because Iran's literally out of water. They don't have nasty water. They don't have clean water. They don't have any water. It's like zero. Like they'd be thankful for some nasty water at this point because at least you can filter it if you have the right filter. But Russia, all they have to do is like hand out some life straws or something, and that should be able to fix it, at least temporarily. But in Iran, you can't just hand out like water. Like if you try to hand out bottled water to the whole like population of a major city, it's nearly impossible.
Yeah, so it would be tough.
And also, I don't think the Iranians are going to bother buying bottled water for their people. I really doubt they're going to do that. Probably like the Red Cross or somebody is probably going to try to do that, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of resources.
Honestly, I don't really think the resources would be available for that many people. There's like almost 100 million people in that country. So I think that's going to just be an issue that cannot be solved. They should have been a little bit more conscientious of the environment that they lived in, considering that it's a freaking desert. You would think that people living in the desert would be pretty conscious about water consumption, But apparently they weren't. So Matthew, they're going to turn into that one episode from Star Trek Voyager where they're like, no something, no water, something like that. I guess I don't know, but
If I was living in Iran, I would be putting in an order for like a dehumidifier or something to like try to suck the water out of the air if there is any water, which I'm not sure if there really is in the desert. The humidity is probably really low, but you could at least try to extract some water, like for the dehumidifier, and then try to purify it and then drink it. Like that's probably what I would try to do.
maybe. I mean, you could do that. That's a good point. Also, by the way, we got to see the Ukrainian darts unit flying a drone over Melitopol, which was pretty wild. This drone had gone a long distance to get here.
Also, Kendra Streetman said, "Do you think there will be a mass exodus from Iran with refugees fleeing?" I don't know. I'm not sure if the Iranian government's going to let them out. That's the question I would have about that. But I'm sure they want to flee if they could.
I would have to say there probably will be, because the Iranian government will probably lose a lot of control in the country at that point because it will be the apocalypse for them as far as they're concerned. So they'll be fleeing to wherever they can go. So we'll have to see what happens as a result of that. But that's the end of the clip, and very nice to see. With that, it is time for us to move on out of that news and on up into Kyiv for me to tell you all, once again, with a great shock, that there is not a speech from Zelensky for tonight. Oh my God, what happened? He's busy today, so he didn't make an address. So that means that we're going to be moving into the second segment of the stream right away without further delay. And we're going to be getting to talking to each and every one of y'all about whatever y'all want to talk about, except for politics, religion, or climate change. Those are the big three that we cannot touch or talk about. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into that segment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night. I was doing a quick scan here to see if we have any more breaking news before we jump back into our super chats, and it looks like for now, the news is on the low. There are some things happening in Russia, but we will be covering that tomorrow on the short war video instead, because it looks to be some routine occurrences, but it looks to be pretty large ones, so we will be covering that tomorrow. But for now, though, it looks like the Middle East has gone quiet, at least for the moment, and Israel's attack might have come to a stop. So jumping right back into our super chat questions, our first one of the last segment goes to Richard Huff, and Richard put in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Richard, for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Richard Huff said, Ukraine should not be expected to cede any land, and it's the equivalent of the Brits coming here to America and claiming the OG colonies are fake states and belong to them, and then Canada deals with them saying we need to give them a few states.
That's a pretty decent way of putting it, actually. And I'd have to say that I'd have to put it this way as well. The problem with what Putin laid out is that he said that Ukraine is an artificial construct. And you were correct on saying what you're saying right there, Richard Huff, because every single country is an artificial construct. I actually talked about this a little bit last night, but I don't know why some people act like a country is like founded in existence, like it's a real physical thing. America is not real. It's something we imagined up. It's not real. Like, there's nothing to say that any country on the planet is real, that it should have the borders that it has, or anything, rather than people just willed them into being. It's an artificial creation of the human mind that we've made in the form of nation states. And so it's really ridiculous to say Ukraine does not exist, because by all measures, it does exist. It has a government, it has defined borders, everyone recognizes those borders, everyone says that the Ukrainian government has power within those borders, the people vote in the elections of the Ukrainian government to vote for their presidents and members of parliament, so on and so forth. That is exactly a nation. It's an artificial construct, but every country is an artificial construct. And that's why I find those sorts of arguments to be ridiculous, because if you agreed with that, then that means that we're back to might is right at that point. You can just say any country does not exist, or should not exist. And we're generally not working in that sort of a time frame anymore in history, where we just say those sorts of things and invade other countries and annex them. We generally nowadays work off the concept of countries have defined borders and exist, and we're all supposed to respect those borders and allow for them to survive as a nation. So generally, that's what I would have to say, in my opinion. And I also see some people saying, well, do they speak Ukrainian? But here's the thing with that as well. They're like, yes, people in Ukraine speak Ukrainian, but there are a lot of people who speak different languages everywhere, and it doesn't mean that it's a part of another country. Like, there's a large amount of people in New York City, in specific areas, that speak Russian, down here near the area of Coney Island. Does that mean that this area is a part of Russia? No. Does that mean, like, for example, there's a large amount of Spanish-speaking people in the United States, that it's a part of Mexico? No. Or a part of Spain? No. It's just a language that they happen to speak. It's kind of like how Austria in a good part of Switzerland, well, actually, most, if not all, of Austria speaks German. A large amount, at least historically, of the people in the Sudetenland spoke German. A large amount of people in Königsberg, or former Königsberg, spoke German. And 31 or 32% of Switzerland speaks German. Does that mean that that's all a part of Germany? No. And does that also mean that they should all be a part of a unified country? Not necessarily. And so that's kind of the issue with that. Like, it doesn't, like, the cultural sort of acclaim, like, there is a lot to be said about a homogenous society is a lot more stable, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that that has to be always the case where, you know, obviously everyone who speaks this one language becomes a part of this one country. That doesn't have to be the case. And in the form of Ukraine, when they left the Soviet Union in 1991, it was completely understood that the borders that they have here on this map were the borders that they were going to have forever, barring if people spoke Russian within specific areas, or Ukrainian, or Polish, or what have you, that was going to be Ukraine. And that's what's been respected up until this day. And it's an artificial construct, yes, but every country is. I mean, hell, Poland's borders, as they have them right now, is a mix of German borders, and also some, at least in historical instances, Lithuanian borders as well. But a large amount of modern Poland isn't even Polish, it's German, historically. And so, do the Germans have a claim on that? No. It's an artificial construct? Yes. And so that generally would be my approach to it, is that that's a very poor argument to make, because you can make that argument for any country, and if it sticks on Ukraine, it could stick on any other country. Like Finland used to be a part of Russia, so it shouldn't exist. And the Baltics were a part of Poland, well, a part of Russia, so they shouldn't exist. And parts of Poland were also a part of Russia, so those also shouldn't exist as well. So on and so forth. And it's a never-ending sort of an argument that never can be defeated if you agree with it, because there is no sort of a logic working with that. You can just claim that for anything anywhere. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who have helped to make this channel possible and help us to keep making it possible well on into the future. And also, let's see, I see someone say, America's diversity has stopped it from having insane birth rate decline. That wasn't even anything that I addressed. I don't know what you were disagreeing with me on, because I was saying that just because people speak different languages, that doesn't mean that they're a part of a specific country. Because that's always the claim these days. That wasn't supposed to be saying, you know, something along those lines. I don't even really know what that's shooting at. But what I was talking about was the legitimacy of a nation, and the legitimacy of a nation is what everyone artificially agrees on in their minds, or conjures up in their imagination. Like how our government even works. That's like our government or democracy isn't the inherently natural form of government. Really, no government is an inherently natural form. All of them are unnatural. They're made of humans and their beliefs. Democracy is just something that we made up. Like, there's no reason that democracy should exist. Like, monarchies, communism, fascism, or any other form of a government system should exist. It's just something that people made up, and everyone just believes that it's real. Like, all of that stuff is make-believe, because the basic sort of a system that would exist if you got rid of all of these make-believe sort of concepts that we have on governments, is anarchy. Like, the natural state of the world would be chaos, with no social contracts or anything for that matter. Most people would live insanely abysmal lives at that kind of a rate. But that would be the basic running of things. But everyone came up in their minds with these imaginary concepts like fascism, communism, monarchies, democracies, so on and so forth. Name any kind of government that you can think of, and we just believe in them, and we work with them that way. Like, the whole Constitution's made up. Like, there's nothing, like the whole idea in the United States of there being rights that are inalienable rights that are natural to man, that's a made-up concept. You can go on endlessly with that sort of a deal. It's a made-up concept. We just say that those are inalienable rights, but are they? I mean, you know, in most countries, like, for example, the United Kingdom, Inalienable rights like freedom of speech don't exist, like in their constitution. They just do not exist. In America, we say that's an inalienable human right to have the freedom to say what you want and believe what you want. Other countries do not have that protected constitutionally, like the United Kingdom or most other countries in Europe. That does not exist. Their constitution is not written that way. In America, it's a truth. You can say whatever you want for the large part, unless you're yelling fire in a building or something like that. You can generally say whatever you want. But in other countries, that's not the case. They don't think that way, and that's not how their government works, and that's not how they conjured up in their heads for their government to function. So it's a really interesting sort of a thing with that. Doesn't mean that all of this is stupid and pointless and that it shouldn't exist. There's a great reason and form for these imaginary ideas to have a great deal of weight and worth, like our idea of democracy in the U.S. Constitution. But still, it's important to understand that those are, at the end of the day, artificial, man-made constructs. And if you were questioning the validity of the artificial existence of the state of Ukraine, then that puts everything that we've ever made, including this nation, its constitution, its laws, and what we believe to be sacred and valued in our society, in question as well. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, Richard Huff. And I'd have to say that was a pretty good point. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and currently we have a poll running right here. It's a pretty much an overall question, a catch-all question to how you see the Ukraine-Russia situation unfolding in the next 6 months. And it looks like 64% of the audience, the overwhelming majority, said that Ukraine and Russia are going to ramp up the fighting on the front lines, while 26% said Russia will probably attack a NATO member state in the next 6 months, and 4% said Ukraine is likely to be abandoned by NATO allies, and 7% said Ukraine and Russia reach a peace deal. And honestly, that is in the exact order I would say is the most likely situation breaking out. Almost a certainty is Ukraine and Russia ramping up the fighting. I would say that's a definite certainty at this point. I would say, honestly, the odds of Russia attacking a NATO member state in the next 6 months, I would honestly put it in my personal educated guess somewhere in the range of 20 to 25%, which is pretty high. That's pretty high odds for Russia attacking a NATO member state, in my personal opinion, because we have that Zapad exercise coming up with nearly 100,000 Russian and Belarusian troops, which happens to almost identically match close to the number that invaded Ukraine back in 2022. So that has me a bit concerned, which is why I say the odds are at 20 to 25%. I would say the odds of Ukraine being abandoned by NATO allies is basically slim to none because Europe is 100% behind Ukraine, even if the U.S. waffles on it. And 8% said Ukraine and Russia reaching a peace deal. I would say that's very low chances at this point. Russia is demanding basically to eliminate the Ukrainian culture, and why the hell would Ukraine agree to that? They're never going to agree to it. So I would say I agree with the exact order here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would see the Ukraine-Russia situation definitely being ramped up. There will be other offensives that the Russians will conduct, so the fighting will increase. And I'd also have to agree with Matthew that there is probably a 24 to 25% chance that the Zapad military exercises coming up in the next month may actually be a guise for the preparations of an actual armed conflict with NATO. There is a possibility for that. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I hope that addressed that incredibly well. I also have to say really quickly that a lot of people are talking about all different things, the abstract things that I was saying about government, or really artificial man-made constructs. And there are a lot of interesting things that people are saying about it. But really quickly to address this, anarchy as an existent state of the world, let's just say that that was what would happen, is not always going to lean towards fascism. If you do not know, there was actually a lot of anarchist states that popped up in the collapse of the Russian Empire and the formation of the Soviet Union during the Russian Civil War. As a matter of fact, one of the most famous anarchist states actually was on the Zaporizhian plains of Ukraine, and that was a state that leaned more towards the communist socialist side than any. But in general, anarchy isn't really something that leans towards fascism or communism. It's the complete lack thereof of any form of a unified governmental structure. It's what could be described as a natural state of chaos, which generally I'm heavily against, because a natural form of chaos is something that does not benefit anyone and actually is a major detriment. The only reason why modern society has been able to get so far as it has is because we have governments that guarantee social contracts and generally allow for some sort of a agreed upon stability, or at least the enforcement of stability, and a process and order of things that maintain stability that allow us to prosper and also work towards progress. But fascism is not inherently far right or far left in nature. It can take really any form, but in reality, it's the complete lack thereof of any sort of right or left-leaning thinking. It's really up to the individuals at that point on a person-to-person basis as to what their personal beliefs are and what they are going to do and how they interact with others. So inherently it
Anarchy
has no
and
form.
anarchy is pretty much impossible in the modern day. Like, it really is impossible. Technology prevents people from being in a state of anarchy, because the reason why people would fall into anarchy, and also, by the way, there's never really been a true anarchist state, pretty much in the history of the world. There's never been a true one. There's been government systems that lean toward anarchy, but not true anarchies, where it's like truly the absence of any type of semblance of governance. There's always some loose form of governance. There's never been completely absent. I think with just maybe a handful of exceptions in certain areas of the world, which we're not going to get into right now. But I don't think it's possible in the modern day, because with all the surveillance technology, etc., there is always going to be someone in charge, and it will never be to a point where there's nothing in charge, in my personal opinion.
To be honest, I don't think anarchy would ever work, because pretty much since the beginning of recorded history, there's never even been a state of anarchy anywhere, really. Like the people who say the Germanic tribes were anarchic, they weren't. They were more so tribal in form, just like Native American tribes were in the Americas when the first European discoverers arrived to the continent. Like, even still, there was not any form of anarchy. There was still some form of a protoplasmic government that existed, or at least some sort of a tribal council that would make decisions, social hierarchies, those sorts of things. There's like really no way, much like fascism and communism, there's really no way at any point in history that anarchy could actually survive. Because also on top of that, considering the state of anarchy, which is incredibly decentralized to the point that the individual is the government of themselves and nobody has control over anyone else, they will get steamrolled by any society that actually forms itself into some sort of a coherent society structure with a hierarchy system and a social contract, because they are able to unify their efforts and maintain stability to a point that they are able to generally overpower and overwhelm an anarchy at any given point. And an anarchy generally would not be able to concert its efforts and power against that invasion unless they also created an equally potent sort of a societal structure with hierarchies, social constructs, and some sort of inherent stability and laws. There's no way
Yeah.
for them to do it. So, like, it just could never exist at any point.
I think the only country which has come the closest to being an anarchy, like a real anarchy, like where there's no form of governance at all and nobody's in charge and everybody's literally every man for themselves, was Somalia for a little while. Technically, from 1991 to 2012, I believe, Somalia didn't have a true government, and they were pretty much just running themselves at that point. And we see how that went. That went terribly. And Somalia was dangerous as hell. It's still dangerous. They have a government now, but it's still extremely dangerous. And it's just a complete chaos. Somalia is not exactly what you'd call like the vision of the future or something like that when it comes to like the governance. It's typically a place that most people will never step foot into, because it's that bad and it's that dangerous. So I don't think anarchy works too well.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it works well at all. And people who subscribe to these extreme beliefs like fascism, communism, or anarchy, I just think they're people who are disconnected and don't really understand the reality of what that kind of life would be like. Because at that point, there's no protections for anyone. You know, like those people, you know, like what's so funny, folks, is that these people who are like fascists or communists or anarchists, they always call for great deals of violence. But if anyone ever like socks them in their jaw, they call the police. They immediately go to the protections that they're provided in a democratic society, like ours, that gives protections to the individuals under the social contract that we made here, for their own protection. But then they still call for the destruction of those very protections that they also hide behind when they need to. It's like it's a very disconnected sort of an existence that a lot of those people have. And I just will never be able to understand or empathize with those people with their kinds of ideas or beliefs. Because and it's so crazy, folks, because I watch stuff like videos people make on YouTube here and there. Like, people will go to Like, let's see, what are some of the crazy groups, like the fringe groups? People will go to like an Antifa meeting or like a Proud Boys meeting or something, and they're like extremists, right? And then they will end up getting in a confrontation with these people, and then what do? They call the police. Like, they're calling for the complete dismantlement, both of these groups are generally, of the way America exists right now. But then whenever they feel like they might be threatened by someone, they immediately lean right onto the system that they want to destroy, and they call the cops. It's like, you can't sit there and demand for the collapse of a governmental system and then completely lean on its resources, abilities, and its very existence itself to protect you and your destructive ideologies. It's a completely paradoxical kind of a thinking that these people have. It makes no sense when you put it into practice in any form. Like, I honestly got to tell you folks, those people are just detached and lost. Like, I feel like if they're going to be detached and lost, they ought to attach themselves to the belief in our country and the way it works, because it's not perfect, but it's better than all the other things that have been tried out so far, which were worse. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to y'all once again for listening to my TED Talk on why anarchy, fascism, and communism cannot work. And if y'all like to, please make sure to buy my book. I'm just kidding, I don't have a book. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is a very generous $50 support from none other than Grim Hades. And thank you very much, Grim, for that $50 support and also helping to keep the channel running. And he said, I got nothing, so just take one from the chat.
And I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Grim Hades. And it's perfectly okay to have none. You had a lot of support, and we massively thank you for that, because you're helping us to keep this thing rolling. And of course, we will make sure to get one from the live chat in your honor, Grim Hades. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into that live chat question in honor of Grim Hades, this one is going to go to Elizabeth, who says, do you think the USA will keep helping Ukraine after the recent summit in Alaska?
I think that the United States will continue to help the state of Ukraine, at least for now. Once again, that's very unpredictable. There can be 9,180s in between now and the next 2 weeks, so it's hard to say, but I think that we will continue to support the state of Ukraine into the future until the war ends. And so with that, I do thank you once again for sponsoring a live chat, Grim Hades, and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that answered that live chat somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Chef Danny B once again. And thank you very much, Danny, for the second support of the night. And we do appreciate that $30 support. He said, Chef Danny again. And I was reading an article about 5th gen fighters. And what is the difference between the F-22 and the F-35? And is it true the F-35 can take off vertical and land the same way?
And it is true. Well, actually, for specific variants, not every F-35 can actually do that. It is only the F-35B that can vertically take off and land. This one right here is an F-35A. And generally, the way that you tell apart the F-35A and the C from the B is that the F-35B, if I can get an overhead view of it, has this little fan duct right here behind the pilot, which has to have its specialized little bay and all that sort of stuff. But let me see if I can show that somewhere else on a real flying model. This is the F-35C of the U.S. Navy, but notice that it doesn't have that little like closed off hatch for the ducted fan that's at the front of the jet. I'm trying to see if I can find you a top-down view. Here we go. So here's where you can see the differences the best. So let me see if I can zoom in on this picture. This is the F-35A of the U.S. Air Force, and when you look right behind the cockpit, there is a small hatch there for a refueling probe, but nothing else. Then when you look at the F-35B, you can actually see right there that giant hatch. That's where the ducted fan is at. This is the only one of the three that actually can vertically take off and land. And then down here is the F-35C. Incredibly similar to the F-35A in pretty much every single way, but the landing gear were further improved, pretty much sturdied up a little bit more, or strengthened, to be able to handle strenuous carrier landings, and it also has an arresting hook to be able to catch on to the arresting wire on an aircraft carrier. So those are generally the big three differences of these aircraft. And the F-35B is actually the biggest underperforming of the three because of that giant ducted fan it has. Because with how it works, they have to design the F-35B's engine nozzle differently than the rest. It has to be able to thrust vector a complete 90 degrees downwards, which takes a decent amount of mechanical engineering. And also that ducted fan at the front takes up a lot of weight. It's actually connected to the main the turbo fan of the jet engine with a shaft, and it has a pretty complicated gearbox to actually drive that front fan, or the ducted fan. So it takes up a lot of weight. It also cuts down on the amount of available fuel tanks in this craft, which means that the F-35B has the shortest range and also the smallest payload ability of the three. So it underperforms because it is a VTOL style aircraft. But technically, it is true that the F-35 can vertically take off and land. But also, another thing is that if it has any kind of heavy ordnance on board when it has to take off, it actually cannot completely vertically take off. It has to have kind of like a running start a little bit and then kind of like leap itself into the air, sort of. So it can't even at that point directly vertically take off. Once it's light and it's burned off most of its fuel and dropped most of its ordnance, it can technically vertically land at that point. But the best way that you can describe a VTOL or aircraft taking off is that it doesn't ever take off like a helicopter. It can take off. It just takes a far shorter landing strip or a runway for it to be able to do that. So I hope that does address it. Also, by the way, Richard Minierin is correct. The F-35C model is also different than the A in the fact that it does have folding wings. I forgot to mention that. To make them more compact for carrier operations, the wings on these, at least the outer parts of the wings, can actually fold up. To save space inside of the hangar bays. So that's another difference of the F-35C to the F-35A or the B model. But these are all generally minor differences. They all operate generally the same way, except for the B model, which is the most different of the three. But I hope that does address that part the best I can, Danny B. And also, the difference between the F-22 and the F-35 is that the F-35 is a jack-of-all-trades kind of an aircraft, so it generally follows the multi-role principle of U.S. aircraft of old, like the F-16 and the F-15, with the F-16 probably being the best example, because when it first rolled out, it was already a multi-role aircraft, meaning that it can engage air and ground targets and was designed to be able to do both. The F-22 was designed and still operates to this day, for the most part, although it technically can operate as a multi-role, as a air superiority fighter, meaning that this thing is designed, purpose-built to engage and destroy enemy aircraft only. It cannot engage ground targets, and it would take a lot to be able to actually engage a ground target with the F-22. It generally isn't designed to do that. So that's the big difference between the F-35 and the F-22. The F-22 can only engage air targets, but it's incredibly good at it. The F-35A can engage air and ground targets, and it's pretty good at doing both. And it also is a little bit more compact, cheaper to make in larger numbers, and is just more versatile, meaning that you can do more with an F-35 than an F-22, given the scenario or the situation. So I hope that does address that incredibly well, at least the difference of the two. And honestly, I would have to say that, in my opinion, if you asked me, in between the two, which is better, I would actually say the F-35 is better because of the fact that it can do anything. It can engage air targets, it can destroy a tank, it can level a building, it can even launch cruise missiles, technically, smaller ones like the JSM, which is a very neat feature of it. The F-22 can only engage enemy aircraft, so it's limited in what it can do. But still, I hope that does...
Which one popped the balloon?
The F-22 is the one that popped the balloon.
Okay, that one's the winner in my book. Honestly, I like that coating on the cockpit, like glass. That coating on the F-22 is just like fire, like in the sun. Like it reflects so cool. It makes like a gold tint on it. You could see that when they were sitting on the tarmac in Alaska. It had the gold tint to the cockpit. That is the coolest thing. I love that.
Let me see here. There's actually some different camouflages that have been applied to the F-22s over the years, which is a little bit shocking because a lot of people think that the F-22 technically doesn't have a camo. It actually does, very lightly, however. It's not like anything extremely different. But you can see here, this is almost like a metal finish with hardly any camouflage, which is very interesting to see. And then other F-22s, like this one, actually have a little bit more of a camouflage applied to them. The F-35 is also like that as well. There are some F-35s that are near metal finish, and others that have almost some sort of a camouflage applied to them, like this one.
Yeah, me personally, I think I'm a fan of the F-22 Raptor over the F-35 just because of the design. The F-22 looks a lot sleeker. Like it really looks like it fits with the name Raptor. This F-35 looks good, but it's just, I don't know, the F-22 beats it out in my opinion.
I thought you were all about function over form, though.
Well, I changed my mind.
Man, he changed his mind quick. He's like, man, screw the function. I'm for the form. But this thing, I gotta say, man, both of them look great. Probably the best looking 5th gens in the world by far.
Yeah, and also this one's flown by Sergeant Fries.
Sergeant Fries,
I
Staff
think
Sergeant.
it's Fries.
Let's see. Is that one of the ground crew guys, or is that the pilot? Because I'm doubting that an NCO is flying an F-35.
Oh, I mean, I would believe that would probably be the pilot, but I think they had to be an officer to be the pilot, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh. Also, there's the helmet-mounted display. I think it's
Oh
pretty cool.
yeah, those are so nice right there. Those are so expensive too. They have to get that molded to their head, but these things are highway robbery right here. I tell you what, they're making some bank on this thing.
Man, carbon fiber and everything. It's pretty cool looking. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here's the weapon bays, the open as it's flying by. Pretty cool look on the inside of the thing.
Also, everybody's saying that's the crew chief.
Oh yeah, I was thinking that, man, because it's like that's got to be the ground crew chief on that plane, because there's no way in hell that that's a pilot, a staff sergeant. Oh look, this one's carrying 2 B-61 nuclear bombs.
Oh wow, look, world ending.
Oh my God! Look! It's carrying bombs. Oh my God! Wow! Look at that! Oh,
It's
dude!
flying. It's gaining altitude. Oh my God.
Here's the internal view of how the F-35B works. You can actually see that giant crankshaft that connects to the ducted fan at the front. Really cool system, actually. It's very neat because the way that VTOL aircraft worked before this is that they used thrust nozzles, like on the AV-8B, which is probably the most famous VTOL aircraft in the world before the F-35, is this AV-8B. And it didn't use a ducted fan and the jet engine directly. The jet engine operated inside of the jet, but it had its thrust diverted equally in 4 parts to 4 different thrust nozzles with 2 on each side of the fuselage. And you could manually adjust, or automatically on some later models, the angle of the nozzles on this aircraft, and they were perfectly placed along the length of the jet that it could operate in a vertical sense, like a helicopter, when they were vented completely downwards. So very interesting sort of a change in how VTOL works. This literally redesigned the entire way that vertical takeoff and landing operates from a mechanical perspective, and technically this is a lot more mechanically complex than what the AV-8s were working off of. But still, they say that it works slightly better, although this does result in decreased payload, which the AV-8B, due to its design, never had a decreased payload because it was literally designed as a VTOL from the outset, so there was no different variant of it. But still, interesting stuff. Anyways, with that, I hope that does answer the question incredibly well, Danny B, and I hope that was a little bit of a in-depth look at how these aircraft kind of function in a sense. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to LC39A, the channel legend. He comes in again with a $132 support. And thank you very much, LC39A, for that massive support yet again. We do appreciate that. He said, LSA is the militant wing of the Enforcer, LOL.
No. no. No, it's
no.
just a community. It's just a community. We just call it an army because it's a cool name. It's not a militant wing of nothing. We are loyal to the U.S. government and always support the United States government. Amen. Hallelujah. God bless America. Massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But the Least Spring Army is the community that supports the Enforcer channel. But a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Bobo Vasquez, who puts in the 20. And thank you very much, Bobo, for that $20 support as well. We do appreciate that. He said, how do you think our president will react if Russia does attempt a major offensive after peace talks?
I'll be honest with you, like, this isn't just trying to, like, take a jab. He probably just ignored it, because it seems like he kind of ignored, like, the Mirnograd breakthrough. He ignored the other offensive that Russia started to conduct earlier this year. He's ignored the amount of ceasefire violations they conducted when we tried ceasefires, which was about 3 different times, and they broke them all within a couple of hours. He's kind of ignored it all, so if another major offensive started, that would also be ignored as well. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion, as far as I would think it would go at this point, based off of prior performance. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 support from Matthew Rod. And thank you very much, Matthew, for that $20 support as well. He said, thanks for doing the work, gents.
Hey, and thank you so much, Matthew Rod, for enjoying the work we do here. We try our best, and I'm glad to know that you enjoy our work and thank us for doing it. And we thank you for supporting it and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Steve, and Steve puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Steve, as well, for that generous support. He said, just a reminder to everyone watching that the Russian regime will never stop taking out civilians, even if the Ukraine war ends. And as we speak, Russia claims land on all of its borders, including with NATO, and Ukraine might have delayed World War III.
I thank you for the support, Steve. I generally agree with you. I don't think the Russians will ever stop at this point, and I think the only thing that would make them stop is not giving in, but standing them down, and letting whatever happens after that happen. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because folks like you help this channel to keep on running and help us to make sure that that sort of an idea or a logic is followed through on here on this channel or spoken about in great detail. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we do have a poll here. Which fighter jet would you fly if you're in the Air Force? About 55% said F-22 and 45% said F-35. And I would say I'm solidly F-22. So if you want an F-22, you can pick it up on the frontage road. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be honest with y'all. I'd have to fly the F-22 as well. I'd have to be with a 55% because the F-35 is great from a function sort of a mindset, but on the form kind of a mindset, it would be a lot cooler to fly an F-22, just being completely honest. So that's what I'd have to say, folks. That's what I have to say. I'd be with the 55% as well, although I do think the F-35 is better in most every way than the F-22. But a big thanks to you all, once again, for answering that poll and letting us know what y'all think, because the F-22 does get style points, that I'll say. I mean, like, dang, look at it. Let me go show it to y'all again. Let's go look at it. Whoa. I mean, look at that thing. Beautiful, beautiful aircraft.
Beautiful. I love it. It's so beautiful.
Why'd you stop playing that beautiful music? But also, one other thing, folks. One other thing. I gotta show y'all something here. Let me. This is probably the coolest looking Black Hawk in the world. The MH-60 SOAR.
I like the Silent Hawk.
Silent Hawk is pretty cool. But this is a really cool looking Black Hawk. Like, this one's really cool. They also have a really cool camo on some of them. I want to see if I can find it here. I don't know what that is supposed to be. But let's see here. I'm trying to find the other one. Maybe it's, I think it's called like the Blackjacks or something like that. I saw it the other day and it was really sick. Let me just type that in. Blackjacks. Oh, here it is. This one, that goes hard.
Yeah, it kind of does. It kind of does. Yeah, somewhat.
Bro, it's got a screeching eagle on it, bro. Ah! You know, like come down and
wow.
Man, I'm telling you, bro, that thing is sick. It's pretty cool to me. I thought it looked neat. But also, then we have the Silent Hawk. Technically, they blew one of these up at Osama bin Laden's compound because apparently it crashed. But this is actually a real picture, apparently, of one of them in a hangar somewhere. But they actually do use these from time to time. Apparently, there's not a lot of them, and there's, like, practically nothing known about them. But they do exist, apparently. And they are pretty neat.
Apparently, it's not that silent, though, because I think Osama and the gang heard it coming.
Dude, they said, "What's that noise?" So they're like, "What the hell's that?" But,
Look! It's the Silent Hawk!
Squaw! Like, wait, hang on, sorry. I forgot it's silent. Squaw! Like, oh my god! But you know another cool helicopter? The Ra-66 Comanche.
Yeah, it looks like the Silent Hawk, just in a slightly different version.
This was supposed to be a stealth helicopter. And technically they canceled the project. But it's cool. They do have some left in museums around here and there. But I just think the things were neat. I mean, look at that and tell me that did not look cool. That thing looked extremely cool. That thing was sick, really. It's a shame that they canceled the program because every picture of that thing, I mean, it looks well beyond even our time right now.
It really does, honestly.
And
I would like to fly. I would like to fly the what do they call that thing? I forgot what they call it. The Aurora, I think they call it.
the Aurora Borealis at this time of year, in this part of the country, within this region, localized entirely within your living room kitchen.
Basically, yeah. Also, by the way, like people rumor that Dark Star mock-up that was in Top Gun was the SR-91 Aurora. People rumored that was it, but I don't know. Nobody knows.
Also, by the way, you want to know something cool, Matthew, about the Comanche? Is that it actually had folding, like most stealth aircraft, folding weapons bays. So when it got ready to engage a target, the weapons would fold out onto their pylons. Like the pylons would flip out, and then they would be able to fire off their weapons. So that way they didn't show a large radar profile for a long period of time.
That sounds cool, but it sounds like something else that could break, which, I'm not ever a huge fan of, is you want your stuff to be pretty much fixed. That way you don't have a chance of breakage and something, going wrong last second. But I guess if you have to have the stealth, though, it would be pretty nice.
Says the guy who likes the F-22, which is being retired early because it has stress fractures in the fuselage.
Well, I'm flying the F-22 as I like the speed of it. I'm not necessarily looking for the weaponry.
Man, I gotta say though, this thing was sick. Also, someone said the Airwolf. Let's go pull up the Airwolf helicopter. Let me go pull it up really quick. Let me go pull it up.
An Airwolf? That's not a werewolf.
This is just an Augusta Westland like 190, I believe.
Yeah, it looks kind of basic.
Let's go. Is this an Augusta Westland? Let's see. Well, it was based off of something. Where the hell was it? Hold up.
Also, Clausen said, was the Aurora real or not? The Aurora was never confirmed. It was just like a conspiracy theory, so nobody knows if it's real. Also, by the way, it's probably not what it's even called in private. That's just some nickname the public gave a plane that they thought they saw, so they didn't see anything.
So this thing was a modified Bell 222. Honestly, it's not that cool in my opinion. Like, it just looks like a civilian helicopter that was kind of modified a good bit. Like, that's what it looks like to me. Not the coolest thing in my book. But one thing I will tell you, though, is that the new Bell 280 Valor that the Army is getting is really cool looking. Now it's the Bell M75.
Oh, I don't like Ospreys.
Oh, get out of here! Well, what do you want? That or the bulbous Sikorsky creature? Did you see the Sikorsky bid for that contract?
Let me see it.
Let's see. I think it was the Defiant X. Yeah, it was the bulbous Sikorsky creature.
Honestly, between the Osprey or this, I'd rather have this.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like the Osprey. I don't think people that ride on the Osprey like it either.
Well, this isn't an Osprey. The Osprey was made, I think, by a whole other company. Let me check that. The MB...
Well, isn't that like basically the same thing? It's like it looks identical.
Well, yeah, Mandy, but the F-35 and the F-22 are both jets. Why don't you like the F-35 as much as you like the F-22?
Because one's a lot sleeker than the other. These things right here are basically the same thing to me. It's like they just made it a little bit more. I don't know. Like I don't like either one of those. I don't like that design.
So this was designed entirely by Bell helicopter, and this was designed by Bell and Boeing, a failing combination, I think. So this was attempt one. This is the upgrade. Well, this is the Army's. The Air Force and the Marines aren't getting any of these, I think. But these are supposed to replace the Blackhawks. So I think they're cool.
Yeah, I'd rather have the Black Hawk, to be honest with you.
What? The Crash Hawk?
The Black Hawk. No, that's not the Crash Hawk, man.
Man, well, I mean, that one that crashed in North Alabama that killed 5 people wasn't really a shining example of how well the Blackhawks are holding up anymore. I mean, those things are like nearly 40-something years old at this point. I mean, those things are getting close to retirement. Like, literally, if they're like people at this point. Well, not
they did good for 40 years. I mean, it did good for 40 years. Just don't run them into the ground. Get some new ones and, just don't let them just be beat to hell and back, and it'll probably fix the problem.
But Matthew, this thing is speedy. It flies like a plane to where it needs to go, and then it drops them off like a helicopter. It's the best of both worlds.
This to me is over engineering, honestly. Just use a helicopter.
Oh my god. Well, you don't think this is over engineering, bro? This thing has a push rotor
I think this is more simplistic.
and counter rotating propellers. Like, this is insanely complex.
I would still have this.
Bruh, I mean, this thing does look cool, though. That I will say. This thing actually is pretty cool looking, like Ligopi. But this thing is really sleek looking. I think it's kind of like speedy. But I like them. Honestly, they weren't bad bids. Like, just being entirely honest, they weren't really bad bids. But I still think that they made a good call with the 280 Valor, because it's like a slimmed down, sleeker, better looking version of the Osprey, which was pretty cool in practice, but not cool in actual implementation. Anyways, with that, enough of this all aircraft business stuff. It's time for us to get on into the next one. What do we got, Matthew?
So jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to Old Warrior, and thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that support. And Old Warrior said, "What are y'all's thoughts on the First Lady's letter to Vladimiron?" It turned out the letter was a little bit less harshly worded than we thought it was after I read it. I will still give credit though. She did write the letter. She tried her best to make the point as pointed as it could be to Putin without probably, getting censored by probably her husband. But I guess it's a good attempt. She could have done nothing, but she sent the letter anyway. But it was very, very, very politely worded, almost to the point where the message was vague. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say I would agree with Matthew on that. It was very vague. It didn't really describe a lot. Like, it was just like, children smiling is great. And children could smile and laugh again. And it's like, okay, well, doesn't really say a lot about the missing Ukrainian kids. It's just like, this really says a lot about kids in general, which isn't the Ukrainian kids that are in Russia right now. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. I found the letter to be a lot less pointed than we originally were anticipating based on what they said about it before they released the letter. So a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, people were saying they want to see the letter, so I'm going to put it under the likes tab real quick so we can show it to the audience, because it looks like a lot of people actually haven't had a chance to see it. So I'm grabbing it right now to put under the likes tab. I'm having a hard time finding it, though, for some reason. I don't know why. Let's see here. Where the hell is it? Like, I retweeted it, so let me see if I missed it. Surely they didn't take it down. Let's see here. Scrolling up one more time, doing a little scan here, looking through. And I am not seeing it under my Twitter feed for some reason. So, oh wait a minute, there it is right there. Okay, it's under the likes tab now.
Let's take a gander at it. All right, here's the letter, folks, from the First Lady of the United States. Dear President Putin, every child shares the same quiet dreams in their heart, whether born randomly into a nation's rustic countryside or a magnificent city center. They dream of love, possibility, and safety from danger. As parents, it is our duty to nurture the next generation's hope. As leaders, the responsibility to sustain our children extends beyond the comfort for a few. Undeniably, we must strive to paint a dignity-filled world for all, so that every soul may wake to peace, and so that the future itself is perfectly guarded. A simple yet profound concept, Mr. Putin, as I'm sure you agree, is that each generation's descendants begin their lives with a purity and innocence which stands above geography, government, and ideology. Yet in today's world, some children are forced to carry a quiet laughter, untouched by the darkness around them, a silent defiance against the forces that can potentially claim their future. Mr. Putin, you can single-handedly restore their melodic laughter. I'm sorry, everyone, I'm not trying to laugh. In protecting the innocence of these children, you will do more than serve Russia alone, you serve humanity itself. Such a bold idea transcends all human division, and you, Mr. Putin, are fit to implement this vision with a stroke of the pen today. It is time, sincerely, Disquiggle. But that is the letter. So there y'all have it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not directly worded, but also at the same time, though, I'm not naive. If she wrote a very pointed letter to Vladimir Putin, it would have never made it into his hands. Like, if it was very pointed, I doubt that would have been handed over to Putin in the first place. So this is probably the best she could have done under the circumstances. So I'll personally still give credit. It is a very lightly worded letter. It's way too lightly worded, but I guess it's better than nothing.
Yeah, this was about as light as it could get. Honestly, folks, it sounded like something that you would hear out of like a like an ad for starving African children. It's like, some children don't have smiles, but together for $5 a month we can return those long lost smiles. And that's kind of why I was laughing a little bit in it, because it felt like I was doing a pitch like that. And I was like, dang, I was like, this letter was very vaguely worded. I mean, props for the letter even being issued at all, just to say that. But at the same time, it was so vaguely worded that it was certainly not insulting or really putting anyone on the spot at all, which is what I was originally thinking it was doing. So, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Foxglow, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Foxglow, as well, for that support. And they said, hey, yeah, and hello. A highly credible Green Beret here said that the U.S. 10th Special Forces Group in Ukraine told them they witnessed a large-scale killing of ethnic Russians in Donetsk before 2022. What do you think?
The U.S. has never officially had any forces inside of Ukraine. So if he said that, he's most likely sharing classified information if they were in Ukraine, which means that he would technically be in violation of the law. And second off, there were no forces of the U.S. in Ukraine, specifically inside of the Donbass, because that means that they would have been fighting the Russians directly at that point, especially before 2022, and any point between 2014 to 2022, which would have been the span of 8 years. And that'd be pretty tough for the Ukrainians to kill anyone inside of the Donbass, considering they weren't even in control of it during that time. The Russians were. So, generally, I have to say that sounds like it's made up. Like, that's probably the best thing that I can say, because, like, a lot of people will come up with all kinds of stuff like that. The truth of the matter is that nobody was getting killed in Ukraine, because I personally know people who are from Ukraine that I knew before the war, and they lived incredibly close to the Donbass in cities like Poltava or Pavlohrad. And I asked them, all about what was going on before the invasion, and they said nothing was going on there. We would take trips to Donetsk, and we would watch the football games there, and we would travel around through that area, and there was nothing ever going on. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to say that there were atrocities going on in Ukraine, because knowing how human rights conscious the Europeans are as a continent, if the Ukrainians were conducting crimes against humanity and slaughtering Russians left and right in the Donbass before the Russians invaded, I can promise you that the Europeans would have brought up something about it. Because if they're bringing up the fact that the Serbians are killing the Kosovans, I would guarantee you, your bottom dollar, they bring up that the Ukrainians were killing the Russians in the Donbass if that ever actually happened. And it didn't, because nobody brought it up, and it simply didn't happen. So I hope that does answer the question well, and I do thank you for the support, but I'd also have to say, I would have to say that, not trying to call that person's credibility into question, but there's got they got to have some proof here to show that. Like, if they thought it was atrocious, I mean, they obviously probably had a phone on them, and if they're willing on sharing what I would believe to be most likely classified information, the fact that U.S. Special Forces were even in Ukraine at all, which they technically weren't supposed to be, that'd be something that you generally take pictures of or something to prove that it actually did happen, because most people don't just come back and go, on God, I swear this happened. Most people take pictures or proof or something. I mean, hell, there were even pictures taken of the Miley massacre, which the army tried to cover up as quickly as they could, and still there were pictures of that massacre that made it out, because people were so appalled by what happened that they went and got it. So I would generally have to say that sounds like it's made up bogus. And also, we do have to remember that there are a lot of people who make up all kinds of bogus. I mean, there's people who used to be generals, or at least higher ranking officials in the U.S. military, like, what is his name, Matthew? Like, people like Douglas McGregor, that say all kinds of stuff about Ukraine that factually is just incorrect. So that would be my 2 bits on that. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Slamina Evil, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support. He said, it is I, Epic Canadian Man. Oh, okay, now I know who you are. I was like, who the hell is Slamina Evil? I was like, never heard of this person, but thank you very much, Canadian Man, for that support. He said, I changed my name to my gamer tag. He said, still around and watching since the start in LSA, and to all the foreign volunteers in Ukraine, good luck to the boys of the Allies.
And thank you so much for the support. Slamming the Evil, Epic Canadian Man. I got to thank you so much for the support. And very interesting to hear you changed your name. And I got to say, thank you so much for still watching to this day. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And a big shout out to the foreign volunteers who are in the International Legion because they've been doing hard work inside of Ukraine, generally across the whole of the front. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best that I can. A big thanks to you so much once again for support. And with that, we're about to be moving on to the next one. Before I do, though, someone, Silent, said, Miley Massacre, can we get some background? It sounds really weird, but the way it's actually spelled is, let's see, let me type it in correctly. Miley, right here. And I can't show you all any pictures. I can't go beyond this, but this is it. The Miley Massacre. It happened in 1968. And what generally happened is that a U.S. infantry unit was airlifted into, I believe it was called the Pink Zone. They were incredibly paranoid. They started to claim that everyone was VC, and they started rounding up women, children, all of them, and just executing them. And I think they ended up killing 70 or something people in this massacre. It was so bad that one of the helicopter pilots, who actually was commended later for his actions, actually landed his helicopter, tried to shield a woman from being shot. A soldier shot him, and then he whipped out his gun on the soldier and said, "If you shoot one more person, I'm going to kill you." And it was a massive showdown that was going on out there. It was absolute chaos. But there are picture evidence and proof of this thing. Even in the short instance that it happened, it only lasted a couple of hours before this ended, and then the army tried to cover it up as much as they could before it hit the public that a horrendous thing like this happened. There were still pictures and evidence of such a thing that happened, even to the small amount that it happened. It was only 70 people, which, I mean, 70 Ukrainian civilians were butchered in Bucha. And that putting it in the scale of how many civilians have died in Ukraine was a drop in the bucket, and there's endless proof of that. There was endless proof of the Miley massacre. So the whole conspiracy theory idea that some people put out, that the Ukrainians were running concentration camps pretty much in the Donbass and just killing Russians all over the place, and for some reason there is no picture or video proof of any of that happening at all. It's a complete fabrication, because literally any atrocity anywhere in the world, there's always some types of firsthand reports, video or picture evidence, or something along those lines to actually prove that it was happening. And in terms of what was happening supposedly in the Donbass, there is no proof for it at all. There's proof of what the Serbs were doing to the Kosovans. There's proof of everything that happened when Yugoslavia collapsed. There is endless proof of the Holocaust. There is endless proof of the Armenian genocide. There's endless proofs of Stalin's gulags. There's endless proof of the Great Leap Forward, of Pol Pot's reign of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. There's endless proof of the famine in India that was generally caused by the British not providing them with food in the middle of the Second World War. Endless examples of all these. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to see actual proof of any of these. And then when it comes to the Donbass, there's no picture or video evidence in the digital age of all ages. And then people want to act like there is some sort of possible credence that there was an atrocity that happened there. And from what I can tell, there was none. There's no proof at all. There's hardly any firsthand accounts. And the only firsthand accounts that are ever given of this supposed atrocity are people who are affiliated with the Russians. Or generally lean towards the Russian side. And that's a little bit weird. That's a little bit weird, because generally there would be someone over here in the West, some Ukrainians that would have escaped, that would have said, yeah, there were people getting massacred down in the Donbass, ethnic Russians and such. It was a horrendous thing. I mean, hell, there were even Nazis that escaped Nazi Germany in the before the war, and they were like, they're rounding up Jews and they're putting them in camps. And everyone generally knew that that was something that was happening. You know, it's like to say the whole thing with the Donbass deal, it's all made up bogus stuff.
Also, by the way, Old Warrior was in the Americol division. He says he flew dust off for the Americol out of Chu Lai.
Very interesting, Old Warrior. I actually didn't know that. That's very cool to hear. But with that, I hope we addressed that well, at least the best I can. Also, let's see. Oh, and thank you for sharing that, Old Warrior. I actually got some of the facts wrong about the Miley massacre. But interesting to hear on that. And I thank you for the support, Old Warrior, and also being with the channel and sharing that with us. That's actually interesting to hear. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Andrew, as well, for that support. He said, I'm beside myself with joy. The president, let's see here. The president was very neutral on this event right here and didn't attack any political opponents, and I appreciate that. And he said he's glad to see this very selfless moment.
And I thank you for the support. It was good to see that it wasn't a moment taken for that. I'd have to agree. And I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have another super chat from none other than Danny B. And thank you very much, Danny, once again for that support. And he put in a 20 this time. He said, Chef Danny again. And on another note, I made a bet with the cooks at the restaurant that the other night my son could toss pizza dough better than anyone here. And he learned how to toss pizza at 7 years old. And I won $75. Oh, wow. Very nice, by the way.
Oh, nice. That's good to hear, Danny B. And I got to thank you for the support. And really cool to hear that your 7-year-old can actually toss pizza dough. I actually personally can't even do that, and I'm 23. So he's well ahead of me. He's set in life at this point, honestly. I wish I could actually toss pizza dough. Because it always looks cool, you know, how they spin the thing and turn it into an actual dough and a crust and everything. I always found that to be incredibly cool. I still do, actually. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and sharing that with us. And congrats on you for winning that bet. That's pretty impressive and neat to hear. So with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, really quickly, I'm actually going to pull up this person here. 1 second, Matthew. I'm going to go.
Also, generally, try to avoid mentioning individual people's names just to avoid any beef or anything like that. Just generally, that's why I left his name out.
Yeah, I'm gonna go look him up because I'm trying to see if I can find anything. Let me see here. 1 second. I'm trying to see. Yeah, I'm gonna say this stuff most likely isn't real because, man, someone out there said if you disagree with anything the guy says, it goes full roid rage. So, like, yeah, I don't think this guy. I think this guy has some more so political motivations to what he's saying, because if it did happen, you know, you can take pictures of it, and there's no picture proof provided anywhere from what I'm seeing of what he's claiming happened. You know, like here's something else I gotta say. There is endless footage and proof of everything out there. Why in the world would the US be so interested in most aspects of talking about human rights, blah, 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 yada, yada? More importantly, the Europeans, which truly will live and die on the hill of human rights. Like, Europeans are so shell-shocked from World War I and World War II, even 70 years after the end of World War II, they will die on the hill of screwing themselves over if it means that they're protecting the rights of individuals and human rights as a whole. So if that was the case, why in the world would the Europeans say nothing about a massacre that was happening in the Donbass for years, knowing that it was happening? I mean, hell, they had no stake, like, just to make it clear, had no stake in the 90s when everyone went down to go help the Kosovans in Serbia. But they did it anyways. So why in the world would they do nothing to help out the people in the Donbass? And it's not that they hate Russians, because as far as I know, there are a lot of Russians that are living in Britain because Britain treats them better than they're treated back in Russia. So that wouldn't make a lot of sense if they absolutely hate Russians, because they would be splattering some Russians here and there in Britain if that was the case. That's not the case. Russian people choose to live in Britain and France because they are treated well there. So that wouldn't make any sense. Like, nothing about any of the stuff that people construct about what was supposedly happening in the Donbass ever stands up to scrutiny. None of it at all. Like, and also on top of that, it's like, if America hated the Russians, wouldn't we have had historically some sort of laws against Russian immigration, at least recently, since the collapse of the Soviet Union? We've had none. There are loads of Russians that live in the area around Coney Island in New York City. I mean, it's so big, they call it Little Russia. As a matter of fact, Victor Bout, which, if you ever watched the movie Lord of War, is based on Victor Bout. Victor Bout started some of his arms dealing to the gangs that were around Little Russia in New York City. It's like, if we hated Russians that badly, do you think that guy would have been able to even have an opportunity to start up his illicit criminal business in the United States? He wouldn't have even lived here. We would have banned them from entering the country and becoming citizens or traveling around in America at all. And that's not the case. Like, none of the whole story that people say about what was happening in the Donbass and the West being anti-Russian stands up to scrutiny. I would say that the West is anti-Russian now because of how Russians act, like as a nation, but I would not say that beforehand we were anti-Russian. As a matter of fact, if anything, the entirety of the West has always been obsessed with the Russians, obsessed with that Soviet style, with the AKs, with the Russian people. Like I know at least before the invasion of the Donbass and then the invasion of Ukraine, a lot of people in America, including myself, found ourselves interested in the Russian world, like the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Belarusians, so on, because they're a weird sort of an interesting cultural group, and it's just interesting to look at them and observe them, a lot like it is with the North Koreans. So saying that, this all of America, the American government and everyone, and the Europeans, they all are just in cahoots quietly to hate on the Russians, although everything showed that they were really interested in the Russians and found them to be interesting, just doesn't really stand up or make a lot of sense at all. Like, none of it does. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Rawr Dakota, who puts in a 10. They said Putin must be removed and release power.
I would agree. Eventually, I think that should be the case. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for support. Rawr Dakota. And hope this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Christian Menard, and Christian put in a 10. And Christian said, shout out to my beautiful fiance Mandy for listening to this with me every night, and also shout out to the both of you, Mandy and Christian. And he said, y'all have educated her on geopolitics more than 8 years of college has, and LSA brothers.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Christian Menard. And I also got to say a big shout out to your fiance Mandy for listening to this every night, because, man, I don't know how she's hanging in listening to it, because we ramble a lot and it gets really in depth. But she must be a keeper if she's hanging out listening to this show, at least on your end, because that means y'all can get along watching the show, and that's got to be something amazing, because I've heard some people have gotten into some bouts over folks watching the show here and there. So a big thanks to you so much for the support, and great to hear that y'all get along and enjoy watching the show. And a big shout out to her as well for sticking in and watching. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to another longtime channel legend. This time it is Marion Deemert. And Marion threw in a $30 donation, by the way. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support as always. I wish there was a comment to address, though, but sadly there isn't. But thank you very much, Marion, once again for helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a massive thanks to Marion Deemer for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, let's see here. Fiuma put in something here which could get the Italians angry. Fiuma said, good pizza dough can't be thrown. You should not eat stuff they throw. It's for entertainment purpose only, at least in Italy. Every pizza I've ever eaten has been thrown, personally, except for, I think one of those chain pizza joints, like now they use like a press to do the pizza. They like press it down or something and it flattens it out. But pretty much like old time Papa John's, I think they still do it. They still toss it around. And anywhere else I've ever gotten a pizza, they tossed around too. So I don't know. That's pretty common in America to do that. Italy might be a little bit specific about it, but I like the pizza the way we got it in America, personally. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say that's interesting to hear, because I've never seen it done for show, actually. Usually they're doing it way at the back of the pizza shops here in America, where you hardly see it, just for the purpose of getting the dough stretched out. That's interesting to hear, though, that apparently over there it's more of a form over function kind of a thing, but in America it takes pure function. Like the throwing of the dough is a really normal thing here in America, like at every pizza shop I've ever seen, at least. But a massive thanks to you so much once again for sharing that with us. It's interesting to hear. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from John Bernard. And thank you, John, as well for that 10. He said, your August CIA payment is now processing.
Hey, thank you for the support and helping that CIA payment to process. I gotta tell you, that's one of the funniest things I ever see, is when people are like, this is a CIA op. It's like, man, if it was a CIA op, just to say it this way, if it was not a CIA op, we wouldn't have to be worrying about how our bills are getting paid every month doing this. Like, just to be completely frank, it's like that's like one thing that I always think when people say that. It's like, man, so we work for the CIA but they don't pay us? It's like, bro, that would be like, I would refuse to work for the CIA if they didn't pay me. I mean, like, hell, we'd be putting in all this work and effort for the CIA for no pay, to then have to still run the show like a normal business. It's like, what incentive would we have at that point to work for the CIA? There would be none. But beyond that, I do think you're going to support enough of this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Foxglow, who puts in a 10. And Foxglow said that one kid who's too lazy to carve his Pinewood Derby car.
Um,
Oh, that's very specific. You calling somebody out? Jeez.
I don't know, but I do thank you for the support, Fox Glow, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Luke UK, who puts in a 10. And Luke said, hello, enforcers. Hello, Luke. He said, hello, everyone. And hello, LSA. Hello. He said, I just want to say I absolutely love the Enforcer channel and great work enforcing Matt, and thank you for what you do.
And thank you for enjoying what we do, Luke UK. And a big hello to the LSA tonight. Hope they've all been having a great night. There's still 6.7 thousand of them here. And I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. Like, today wasn't the biggest news day that I've ever seen, but it was crazy because we still ended up getting up to a peak viewership of 10.7 thousand people, which is wild. Like, even on a really slower news day, we still end up getting more than 10,000 people on air nowadays. Really crazy to see. But beyond that, I gotta thank everyone for once again enjoying our stream tonight, and you as well, Luke UK, and supporting the channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Old Warrior, who puts in a 10. And Old Warrior said Tehran is on the same parallel as Vegas and equally desert. And imagine Vegas without water. And oh, wait, Lake Powell is almost Deadpool stage. And I think we should ask for water from Russia? JK.
Oh, no, we're gonna build a giant pipe from the Great Lakes. Or better yet, I think this would be a greater idea, is that the states of Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico begin to have population quotas that they cannot exceed because the amount of resources available in the region will not be able to support the amount of people there. I think that's the better idea because it is so stupid that these states were like, yeah, let's let millions of people crowd into this city in the middle of the freaking desert and put absolutely no restrictions on water consumption on any of them. Like, it was like, that is just a stupid idea from the start. Like, no arid country in the world does that at all. There's like some water restrictions out there, or the water bill's pricey enough to deter extreme water consumption. Nah, here in America, man, shit, they build a giant strip and then they have huge water fountains on it that still run, wasting loads of water in the middle of a desert. Like, that is one of the goofiest things ever. And now, like I gotta be honest with y'all, I could, like, nothing against the folks living in Las Vegas or anywhere in these arid regions, but I do have something against their state and local governments for not thinking with a damn brain for a minute to go, maybe we shouldn't be wasting all of this water out here in the middle of a desert, considering that water is a little bit harder to come by in the desert. Like, and also, I would have to say, as far as water goes, no, they're not getting any water. They're not sapping water out of the water-rich regions of the East Coast and screwing over their water tables, possibly, to try and support their overpopulation in the desert. That's not happening. Like, I believe that ought to be completely refused on the federal level. And they ought to say, you're going to have to find some other solution to this. Either you start setting population quotas and people have to move out, or something along those lines, because not this many people can live in the middle of a freaking desert and expect to get by with consuming as much water as they want. Like that, like it's just endless stupidity to that degree. That's the same thing they did in Iran that's causing this problem in Iran right now. They had no water consumption restrictions, so they just let people go wild consuming water in the middle of a desert. Like, the water replenishes like crazy. It's like, here in Alabama, we can go crazy consuming water all day because Alabama is actually one of the most water-dense states in America. We have an endless supply of water. No matter how many people are living in Alabama right now, there's no way for them to consume even close to a significant fraction of all the fresh water available in the state on any given day. In the desert, however, that's totally different, and it already is showing that that's the case. So as far as Iran, they completely mismanaged, and I wish that America would wake up to the mismanagement to that degree. And another thing that just kind of gets me a little bit angry, folks, is this. Like, I don't mean to, like, sound like one of those people who are kind of like the green freaks, you know, like, who are really into this. But who the hell thought it was a great idea to build golf courses in the middle of the desert? Like, these things are extremely water consumptive in normal conditions, much less in the desert. So who in the world said, yeah, let's start opening up all of these giant golf courses throughout Las Vegas? And the city, the municipality, signed off on that happening. Like, who the hell did that? Like, who in the world was in the city government in Las Vegas and went, yeah, you know what would even be better? If we make these fake lakes as well, to just waste the water away. Like, you know, we're in the middle of a desert. It gets 100 degrees out here. There's literally no rainfall for the most part, at least in our region. But we'll make these crappy little lakes here in the middle of this neighborhood to make it seem a little bit nicer. just so that way we can waste the water away. Like, it's ridiculous. And now they're going, oh, Lake Powell's Deadpooling. What happened? It's like, yo, we're wasting the freaking waters. What happening? You know, like, you can't do that in the middle of a freaking desert. Man, I gotta say, y'all, like, I just don't know where common sense goes sometimes in this country, or for just people in general, like the people in Iran or in America sometimes, because it's like, for example, if you live in the desert, maybe it's not a great idea to build everything out of timber. Maybe not. And then people will do it. And then they'll go, oh man, like it's so tough to upkeep these buildings. It's like, yeah, because you're not building to the environment. You got to build to the environment. That's historically been what you do. What are you doing? Like you build them with small windows to conserve the heat. Like, you know, to make sure the heat stays out. Windows are like greenhouses. Make the window smaller. They make the casinos out there. Like everything they do out there is just wrong. Like that's one thing that aggravates me about living in America in a desert, is that everything done about the cities is entirely wrong. They build these cities like they're in the middle of the East Coast in a deciduous forest region with a high amount of rainfall and a decent humidity. That's not the case here. Like, this is an arid desert. You have to build to the environment. You have to be able to conserve the water. The water consumption is literally the most important thing in the desert. And they have not done that in Iran or here. And they're paying for it now in Iran. And in a couple of years, the folks in Las Vegas are unfortunately going to be paying for it as well, because nobody in America thinks with their brain when it comes to this sort of a level of thinking with common sense, like it's the desert. You know, anyways, with that. Exactly. Like, folks, I hope I'm not sounding like I'm crazy here. Like, this stuff just makes sense, right? Like, don't waste water in the middle of a desert. That just makes sense. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jason Curling, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Jason, as well, for that support. He said, I love watching the Enforcer channel on my B-Day. And also, happy birthday to you, Jason Curling. And I'll be having a good one, by the way. He said, guys sound very festive for it. I'm glad we do. And I hope you had a great birthday as well. And it's good to hear from you. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Jason Curling. And also, happy birthday to you. I hope you had a great birthday today. And I hope that the show was great. I hope that you enjoyed it tonight. And I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible tonight, so that we could tell you a happy birthday. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Arar983, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Arar, as well, for that support. They said, does this channel ever cover Gaza? I'm just curious. I never hear the subject talked about here. And is it too political? And no, we cover Gaza. We do cover Gaza from time to time. It's just, honestly, I'll be honest with you, Gaza is not my favorite topic. I'm not sure if it's the Enforcer's favorite topic either. It's really a tricky situation there. It's kind of gotten a little bit political. And also, I have mixed feelings about it. So it's not really our favorite thing to cover, but there is news that comes out from there. There is news recently that apparently Israel's preparing for an offensive on Gaza City itself. That's going to be happening pretty soon. Apparently, they're finalizing the plans for that. But it's not a really fantastic topic to cover, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, yes, we do cover it. We actually covered it tonight. But as far as like, the starving children, we don't cover that side of things much at all, if anywhere. Generally, we keep it on the side of the actual foreign policy developments. Because even in Ukraine, just to say, like, if you're asking that question geared towards, do you cover the suffering of the Gazan people? No, because we don't even really cover the attacks that the Russians conduct against Ukrainian civilians on the channel, because it generally falls out of our purview of what we're actually focused on and covering. This channel doesn't necessarily focus on the humanitarian side a great deal. We do factor it into our analysis and talking points, but it's not something that's a major deal. We generally cover the foreign policy developments or the militaristic developments in the world only, and leave everything else out. So yes, we do cover the Gaza Strip to the extent we can, and I also have to agree with Matthew, it's not really my favorite topic, because I do know that there is a huge humanitarian crisis going on there at the moment, and it is very political, because people say they deserve it or they don't, or this should be done to the Israelis, and so on and so forth, or it just becomes extremely brain dead at some degree. So we also try and avoid it for that reason. And also, I generally am not really a big fan, to be entirely honest, of really anyone involved in that. There's just more so strategic interest at play, and that's what more so plays into the factor of how we explain it and analyze it. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to NK Production, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, NK, for that support. And they said, stop calling my channel North Korea Productions. Is it NK equals Nazar Kovaleski, but just my initials. My name is not Kim. And I was just joking, my friend. I was just joking about it. It was just a lighthearted joke, so don't take it personal. But he said, I make calming videos to ease anxiety, not world dominance, and much love, friends in LSA.
Well, I thank you, Kim. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Nikolai.
Wait a minute now. Hold on. Wait a minute.
Oh my God, you had to. Like, you had to.
I'm sorry. Also, by the way, I'm not like making fun of you, NK Production. I'm just, making a joke.
But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Nazar. We are not trying to make fun of you at all with that, and we don't want you to think that we're trying to like jab at you or have a laugh on your expense. We were just kidding around with that, and I do thank you massively for support and being here for an incredibly long time and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keeping it running. And so I hope you do understand that we're just entirely joking. We're not trying to have a jab at you or have a laugh.
It's in good fun. I want to make that disclaimer too. It's in good fun. I'm like seriously not. We don't mean anything by it. It's just a joke.
But I do thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Just Dad Good, who puts in a $9 donation, and thank you very much, Just Dad Good, for that support as well. He said, you should write a book. What will it be about if you were to write one?
Honestly, if I was to write a book, there are a lot of book ideas. I don't like writing. I don't really like typing a lot because in the process of just doing the first 10 minutes of the show and then also doing all of the searching and stuff for the show beforehand and then also doing some other stuff throughout the day, I'm worn out of typing. Like if I put everything that I typed on a keyboard throughout the day, I'm guaranteed typing at least maybe 15 pages of stuff a day. That doesn't sound like a lot, and I know that's life work for some people, but on top of everything else, I just don't really like the idea of writing. So I always have lots of ideas for books, but never get to even writing one at all. But if I had an idea for a book, generally one idea that I had was writing a book about a hypothetical war in Europe and writing it from a first-person perspective of a soldier in that war, like from their specific focalized view of what it would look like or what it would be, and have it run off of a realistic framework of a sense. Another one that I had would be some sort of like a science fiction sort of a thing. But it would be hyper realistic, like within some very realistic parameters. Or another one would be writing pretty much a book on what the country should look like 50 years from now and what should be done to get there. Like those are some ideas that I like throw around here and there in my head as I'm just doing stuff. Oh, that'd be a pretty cool book to write. And then I never write a single letter of that. But beyond that, I do hope that does address it the best I can. I thank you so much for support. Matthew, if you had to write a book, what would you write?
If I had to write a book, honestly, if I was to write like something sort of academic or something that was like actually, with some substance to it, I would probably write a book about the psychology of world leaders and how they're all kind of similar in certain ways or another, how they usually fit a certain stereotype when it comes to leading countries. I think that would be pretty fascinating, but obviously I don't have the background, like the education to be able to be considered an expert on it. So sadly, probably wouldn't have the like the book sales I'm hoping for because obviously I'm just a layman on the topic. But it would be fascinating though if I could like speak to people that were psychologists that could attest to my theories on it and have them in the book. That would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty neat. And also, I see some people like, wow, those would be cool books to read. Yeah, Matthew's book would be incredibly interesting to read because he actually talks in detail to me about that. Sometimes I'm like, wow, that's actually really interesting. Matthew actually has a pretty big interest in psychology. Like not like professionally learned in it a lot like me. We only took a few classes each on that in college, but still, it is quite interesting when he talks about it. I'm like, that is really neat. But I see some people like, oh, sci-fi book. Yeah, you know what I was thinking would be cool because this is something that a lot of people don't think about. But science fiction. And I thought this would be a really cool concept. What if you wrote a science fiction book, but it wasn't like Star Trek or Star Wars where it's like an extremely fleshed out spacefaring kind of society? What if they're like right on the cusp of space exploration, like hardly? Like it's almost like the 1700s, but in space with the amount of time it takes to do anything. Like it's not like you get to the next star system in days; it takes months or something along those lines. And nothing is like like photon torpedoes or laser systems. It's all kinetic weapons. Like a missile, you just have to have the orbital trajectories right to slingshot around the planet. And in the process of slingshotting around it, you're throwing stuff down the planet, missiles, such things. But at the same time, they're also trying to shoot missile interceptors back at you. And then once you slingshot around the planet, you're on a trajectory back to where you came from. That sort of thing. Like, that would be pretty interesting stuff to kind of make a book over, and also talk about the politics and the diplomacy involved in all of it, that sort of a deal, and make it extremely realistic, like hyper realistic to an early spacefaring sort of a society, not one that's incredibly well founded, going to the far depths of Bakuba and then having like 9 gazillion species that go Ikikubasa Aka, or something, like none of that. Like, it's just extremely realistic, really just humans that have colonized loads of planets and never found aliens, but these planets ended up evolving, at least over the next few decades, to actually create some sort of schism or a war. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, I see some people saying that's The Expanse. I've never heard of that book, but if it's like that actually sounds interesting. I might actually buy that book and read it. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Robert Krogan. He puts in a 6. He said, if you were Zelensky, would you visit America without a guarantee of new support?
Yeah, I would, because the alternative is that you might not show up and then they might not support you anyway. So at least showing up, you kind of have a shot if that was the case. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Uncover Cube 7, who puts in a 5. He said, check out Magawa, the African giant pouched rat in LOC.
Let's see here. Let's take a look at that thing. What in the world? This was a landmine sniffing rat. This one.
I'm the giant rat that makes all of the rules.
I'm the giant rat that sniffs all of the landmines. What the hell?
That's a big rat,
Man,
honestly.
that is a giant rat. That is an insanely huge
What is that?
rat.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. I just totally missed something here. What was that miniature banana that they were feeding the rat? Do you see that?
That looks like a Gros Michel or something like a Thai banana maybe. Like, those are small.
Yeah, it's like a real weird banana. It's like a miniature or something. It's just big enough for the rat to pick up.
Bruh, they feeding this thing nanners out here for sniffing for landmines. Bro,
how's the thing supposed to eat that? Like, is it expected to peel the banana? Like, how is it even going to eat it?
I don't even know, honestly. But here's another one of the rat.
Oh boy, yeah, these things right here are definitely rat looking.
Let's see. Let's take a look at their Wikipedia. There's no pictures really of these rats. I guess they're just that uneventful. They're just kind of like big rats. So, but wow, this one had a lot softer of a coat than this one, and apparently this might be a different rat, like not that rat. But Magawa, the bomb sniffing rat. I've never heard of a bomb sniffing rat in my life. Actually, this is the first time I've ever heard of this. Pretty interesting.
They say this rat right here is the most beautiful rat in Magawa. You gotta love this rat. This rat right here, it knows exactly what it's talking about. The finest fur. You'll never find better fur than this. Not even Louis Vuitton. They don't match this fur. This is fur that you can get in the store. And they even have custom bananas. He's a royal rat.
They said, sir, we have to find a way to sniff out the landmines. And I said, make bomb sniffing great again. Get Magawa the rat on this. He will sniff them out. We will find them and dig them up and dispose of them very safely. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. They'll say that the rats in New York City have never been more useful. I got to tell you, I knew a couple of rats in New York City. Back in the old days, you had to know them to get a contract back in the city.
But sir, they said, sir, rats are nasty. You can't let that rat inside your place. It's going to infect it with the lice. You can't have lice. It's not nice to have lice in your place. You got to keep those rats on the exterior. That's what they said. I said the whole time, we're not trying to be discriminating against rats. Let them right in. I say, we're not going to have none of that here. I tell you, let the rats in. Open the door. Let's open that nice door handle and let that rat right in here.
I got to be honest with you. Some people said that I had a thing against rats. I don't have an issue with rats. I have some friends who happen to be rats. Some of them are great. Some of them are in Congress. Great people, wonderful people. But beyond that, though, I do have to say really quickly that while some people did bring up the whole lice issue, a lot of people said that lice is plural. And I said, what the hell is a singular lice? And they said it's louse. And I'm not even kidding. It's legitimately a louse. So I guess, like, one lice is an entire country. Very weird concept. Do not understand. So what I'm thinking is that if we take all the lice and we separate them up into one at a time, we will be turning them into a giant country. We will be able to populate the United States with a great deal of Laotian workers, people. Laotian workers. That's where we're heading.
That sounds like a great idea. I don't think I've heard an idea quite like that. They say this idea should be spread around the world for the whole world to see. They say, sir, this idea is like the best idea we've ever heard in the history of ideas. That's what they said to me, sir. I gotta refer to myself as sir, just gotta make sure you know. Sir, thank you, sir.
And I gotta be honest with you, a lot of people are talking about this whole deal. They're saying, he's rolling. Of course I'm rolling. I'm rolling on double nickels. You know what I mean? I'm rolling on dimes. It's a great thing. I have plenty of dime pieces that I know. Took him furniture shopping so that way we can find Magawa, the right kind of couch to be able to sit on when he got done bomb sniffing all day. I was sitting there wondering, I was thinking, we have bomb sniffing dogs. Those are really expensive. We need to cut down on government expense. Get loads of rats. They already wander around the airports holding up little signs. They say, help me, I'm poor. Put them to work. Have them sniffing the bombs. It's a great idea. They're not in the subways anymore. Actually, by the way, folks, clarification. We didn't call up the National Guard in New York City because the subways are unsafe because of people. It was actually because of the rats. Have you seen the rats in New York City? Those things are freaking giant. Those things could actually shiv you and steal your money. That's why we called up the National Guard. I actually knew a friend of mine. His name was Giuliani. He got mugged down there by a rat. It was scary stuff. They came out and said, give me all that money. And he had to give it all the money, and then it ran off down the tracks, hit right into the train. Train rolled right over it. Crazy stuff.
There are some rats, though. We don't like some rats. There's some rats out there that aren't quite nice. They say, that's not a nice rat, sir. That's a bad rat right there. All those rats that say something about a list. I say, what, sir, did you say about that list? I don't know what you're saying about that list. I don't hear nothing out there at all. I hear nothing.
He's used the soundboard the second time. Mr. President, there's been a second use of the soundboard. Board Air Force One immediately. Ground all flights. We've got to figure out why in the hell this second soundboard use has happened tonight. But very weird stuff. Very weird. But beyond that, I do see a lot of people talking about, it's called rodentia. I do not know what the hell rodentia is. That sounds like some kind of a nice furniture. Like a rodentia. Like, you walk into the room and be like, oh, look, we have the news sitting out on the rodentia. That's great. But in the old economy under the last president, there were no rodentia. Now we have plenty of rodentias. We're making America rodentia again. It's a great, wonderful thing. It's an incredible thing. People are all over the country going, wow, we have so many rodentia. This is a wonderful thing. But beyond that, we do have to move on. We have to move on into the next questions because we have many of them to cover. And we have to get to the live chat questions because we always get the live chat questions. We never miss them. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Big Daddy J, who puts in a 5. He said, why not take Transnistria off the board with Moldova and help to remove the Russian presence on their western flank and help a neighbor at the same time?
Generally because we would have to ask for the permission of Moldova, and that's generally considered to be an internal Moldovan matter with Transnistria. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Andrew Honeycutt. And Andrew said, the meeting only served to prop up Putin's government and legitimize his regime in the eyes of his populace. And it seems like a propaganda coup and a win for Putin and LSA.
Maybe. But I think we did a little bit of a intimidating here and there. So it kind of panned out to be a net neutral. They got a little bit, we got a little bit. That's the way I would think of it. A deal is made when a deal is made. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I thank you once again for support and help this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Vermilion, who puts in a 5. And Vermilion said, that's exactly what a CIA plant would say. Actually, a CIA plant wouldn't say anything because plants can't speak. But he said, kidding, and thanks for the good news, guys. And will Russia be held liable for damages as a belligerent?
Yeah, technically, they could be. That's if they agree to that, though, in a conditional peace treaty, and the treaty coming out of this will be conditional, so that most likely will not be something imposed on the Russians. But I would have to say you're kind of right. That is what a CIA plant would say if they could speak. But generally, I think the plants in the CIA headquarters, they just kind of sit there and get watered here and there. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
But sir, the plants do speak. There's pansies. Pansies, they speak sometimes. You know, they're weak people. So weak, they call them panicking.
Oh my God. Oh, what a stupid term. But anyways, moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Andrew Honeycutt yet again, who puts in a 5. And he said, the Smithsonian and 8 other museums are set to be reviewed for content control with more to come. Excuse me. And I'd like to hear your opinions. I'm not a fan. And L will say.
I would actually have to know more about that, Andrew Honeycutt, to be able to speak on it, because I haven't heard of that. That's the first time I've heard of this, and that's interesting. I don't really know what that's going to result into, but one thing I gotta be entirely honest of, people, is that I don't really like messing with museums. You gotta keep them for what they are, and generally they're pretty cool. You know, you walk into a museum, you see a couple of weird items, so, you know, you go down to the National Air and Space Museum. Holy moly, they got planes hanging from the ceiling. They're not flying, they're sitting stationary. How do they do that? How do they do that? I don't know. It's a miracle, though. It's an absolute miracle. It's like a miracle of God. Look at it. It's floating from the ceiling. They're not even flying.
I tell you what, well, look, the Air and Space Museum here at the Smithsonian, I look at all the planes on the ceiling, and I say to myself, you could really hit some geese with that, like if you throttle it up and slam it into like a whole, like, you know, flock. You could really slam them with that, and it could serve as a lot of meat for the winter, you know?
I gotta be honest with you, I do not even know what the hell that guy's saying. The worm controls him, it just makes him do whatever. But beyond that,
Don't mind me. It's sometimes it's you can't control it. Sometimes, you know, you know, it's up there in the brain. It's like steering. It's at the steering wheel, and the worm's taking the wheel.
this guy's cooked. But beyond that, I do have to say that they have an X-Wing in the museum. That's not really an aircraft, but I guess it kind of counts. I guess that's what they're going to be getting at. And I just saw someone say that they're going to be unwoking museums. I don't really know how you could do that, though, because a museum isn't really inherently political. It's, you know, just kind of there. So I don't really know how you could do that. I mean, like, how in the hell is a V1 Doodlebug political? How is it political? How is it woke or unwoke? It's just a thing. It's an object. That's what the museums are generally about, like this capsule from Apollo. Some people say Apollo is a Greek god.
Speaking of woke, I just remember when I first woke up, the worm told me, skip the coffee and go to the raw meat.
Honestly, I don't really know why I picked this guy for health secretary. That's kind of weird, but beyond that, I will have to say,
Because I'm healthy.
well, I mean, I guess, you know, he does like a couple of push-ups or something. I don't really know. I don't know what a push-up is, but
A couple of visits to the spray tan parlor, and you're doing good. Plus 10 health HP.
this guy's like, honestly, it's like he's cooking.
You saw him come out like allegedly. I heard that some individual might have walked out of a tanning parlor the other day. Kind of interesting, but you know, that's allegedly.
Allegedly. But generally, I do not know a lot about what they would even be curating or reassessing. I wouldn't really know, but I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Andrew Honeycutt. But I'll have to look into that a little bit more to formulate an opinion. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next support here goes to none other than Butchie777, who puts in a 10-pound donation. And thank you very much, Butchie, for that support as well. We got the YouTube creature putting the hat back, and he is on the block. He is posted up. It looks like he is out there, I tell you what. But thank you very much, Butchie, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support as well, Butchie, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $5 support from Real Don the Forsaken. He said, I'd give your president impersonation a 6 out of 10. Oh, I guess he's referring to yours, I guess.
I don't know. Which one? I mean, like, I don't know if it's yours or mine or whose. Like, I don't know. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And as far as whose that's rating, that's ambiguous. But I thank you for putting us at least over a 5 because, it could be a 4 or something or worse. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And also, I see some people talking about they're going to be curating the history museums. I mean, like, I guess, but the thing is, though, is that history of the United States isn't all bad or good thing. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people know, is that there's a lot of nuance to history. Like, America's done many amazingly good things. Things that no other country has hardly ever done. But we've also done some things that are questionable, like every other country. And you kind of have to show that in its light. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to be ashamed of the country or hate it. It's just that, you know, you have to know what the country's done, good and bad, and still be proud of it because it's your country. That's kind of how it works. And I like, the one thing I don't like, folks, is that nowadays that's really a politicized thing. Like, if you lean, like, just to be entirely honest, if you lean, like, really far to the left, like you act like the country's just absolutely a shame. And then if you lean really far to the right, you act like the country's never done anything wrong and is perfect. And I don't really know why that's the case, because it's really more down the middle. Like, the country has its flaws like every other. It's a fine country, though. There's a lot that can be improved. There's a lot that we've done that wasn't really the right thing to do. And there's a lot of things that we did that was great and amazing and incredible. But, you know, you have to show it with that kind of, like, you have to show it with that nuance. You know, still have pride in the country, but still say there's been times where maybe the right decision wasn't made here and there, you know, like the Trail of Tears, all those sorts of things, the internment camps for the Japanese in World War II. Not really the greatest things, but at the same time, we still did amazing things. Beyond that, we landed on the moon. We did all kinds of incredible stuff as a country. But with that, I hope that kind of addresses that well, at least in my opinion, because I don't know why people can't take the nuance of it all. It's not black and white. You know, still be proud of the country, but there's some things that we've done that are great and not so great. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the B Knight 3, who puts in a 5. They said, what's the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist? Words.
A libertarian, I really don't know how to describe a libertarian too much. A libertarian tries to have as little government regulation as possible. There's still a government, but it doesn't really get involved in the morality of the citizens' decisions beyond them possibly harming or killing another citizen or themselves. And anarchist generally wants no government to exist, no social contract of any kind or any sort, and wants the natural state of things to be inherently chaotic, with no centralized control, law and order, social contracts, or anything along those lines, or guaranteed rights or privileges of citizens. So that generally, I would say, is the best way I could describe an anarchist, or, you know, a libertarian, I guess. That would be my best description of it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here goes to Bradley Burdett, who put in a 4, along with Rebecca Thornton, who threw in a 3, and Plazoth, who threw in a 2. And thank you very much, Plazoth, Rebecca, and Bradley for that support, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 2 from Pedal to the Metal 65, who said LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Pedal to the Metal 65, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment, who said, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is from LSA Sergeant Figment. And a massive thanks to you once again, and helping this channel to keep on running. And please, folks, make sure to hit the like button. We'd love to have y'all. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from FIFA King 96, who said, how much longer is the Ukraine versus Russia going to continue?
I'd say at least for another year to 2 years at this point, in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Andrew Honeycutt, and he said, emergency alert, Oceania has been defeated, Eurasia.
Strong and peaceful, wise and brave. But anyways, I do thank you for the support, Andrew Honeycutt. And we had to watch that movie in school. That was a weird movie.
Ingsoc.
Yeah, you know, that whole thing, like, you know, where they had the party speaker and they all had to get up and do, like, the salute where it looked like their hands were tied above their head and all that. Like, we watched that movie and we read the book. It was, I gotta be honest with y'all, hot take, I think 1984 is kind of a little overrated. Like the message is a good message, but honestly, the book was long-winded. Like, very long-winded in my opinion. And also, I don't know. It just wasn't really my cup of tea, sort of a book. Like, if I had to say, like, out of them all, I think Animal Farm was a little bit better than 1984. But that's my personal opinion. I know it's the other way around for most people. Most people thought Animal Farm was lame and 1984 was better. But I thought Animal Farm was the better of his books that he made on that kind of a topic. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jason Curling, and thank you very much, Jason, as well, for that $2 support. And I did not see a comment left with it, but we do appreciate that very, very much. And with that, Jason, you are actually the last super chat. So we are now going to jump right into our live chat questions proper, including our Morse code decoders. And tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Erbo Garbo, Heroyal Fluffiness, Kush, and Copio Terix. They said the Morse says, Russia is getting slammed a little here and there on the front. Not very nice look in LT LSA.
Not very nice. And ding, 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 shh. And that is the sound of money. Y'all got that dent on the nail? That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate the Elite Spring Army Single Corps for continuing to get that correct time and time again each and every single night. A big congratulations to y'all. And I got to say, y'all did a good job again. Right on the mark. And so with that, it's time for us to get to the live chat questions. Due to time constraints tonight, we're going to be getting 3 live chat questions and then rounding this thing on out. So with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And that question goes to Bryant Rudy, who said, do you think Putin is going to lose his shit over his Russian soldiers getting encircled at Pokrovsk?
Probably not. This isn't the first time it's happened, and they'll probably just ignore it because the Russians like to brush things over like that and just act like it didn't happen. So I would have to say I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Happy Dragon, who said, do you think they did a thorough sweep of the beast after Putin got out?
Oh, absolutely. Like they certainly did. The Secret Service would do a sweep of it anyways, just in case, but they certainly did one after Putin got out. So a big thanks to you for asking a good question like that. I hope that answers that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Bobo Yazala, who said, what do y'all really think about the B-2 stealth bomber and the 4 F-35 fighter jets flying over P&T at the Alaska meeting? I would say that was a very, very impressive thing to see. Also, it clearly caught Putin off guard. I watched it back a couple more times and saw the entire footage from a face view of Putin. You could tell by the way he was looking up at the thing. He was shocked that the president had the balls to do something like that with him walking into Alaska. I would say it was a good thing. Now, the meeting itself, I didn't really agree with the whole premise of the meeting, but at least there was a couple little things done here and there to sort of send a message to Putin while he was here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I pretty much have to agree with that full on. To the point, I really don't have a lot to add. Like, Matty pretty much hit all of my talking points down on the nail as well. I'd agree with him. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to say a massive, huge, incredible thanks to all of y'all once again for watching tonight. We had a peak viewership of 10.7 thousand people tonight, and 93,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. An absolutely incredible amount. And I have to thank you all so much once again for being here tonight. I hope y'all join us tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the Sunday night fundraiser, and also the rest of the 24 hours of the news that will happen up until that point. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight. A huge shout out to the 100,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we will see every single one of you tomorrow for the Sunday night fundraiser stream. And we look forward to seeing you on that stream tomorrow night. And if there is enough news to cover, I'll be making a short war video tomorrow to bring all the news midday as well. So with that, folks, Slava Ukraine, Hero Slava, get some rest, and good night.